Joe Rogan Podcast. Check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you very much.
Great to see you, as always.
Good to see you, too.
You got a bunch of notes. You got a lot of things to talk about.
Yes.
We were starting to talk outside. We're like, hold these thoughts. Let's bring them in here.
Well, here's where I am. As a criminologist, I take a different approach to things. I'm not obviously a doctor or a scientist, thankfully. And as a criminologist, you get a view of the world that's quite interesting. And so I took a deep dive into pharma. But I want to put that off for a second because I know you know a lot of these CIA operations, like Paperclip, where we bring over people who are working on bioweapons from Japan and from Germany, and we don't prosecute them, and we use them to be the beginning of the U.S. bioweapons program. And I know you know MK Ultra and Mockingbird, but do you know the one called Project Gladio?
No, I do not.
Put your seatbelt on, because this one just tops it all. So this was World War II ends. And the OSS, which was the CIA at the time, decides to leave behind, rather than take everybody home, all the American soldiers, they're going to leave behind a bunch of them. Hey, you guys, hide your weapons, hide your rifles, secrete all the grenades and ammunition and put it in bunkers and just sit tight until we have some ideas of things you ought to do. So eventually, a few hundred of them stay behind, and they are going to do things in Europe to stop communism, to stop socialism, to fight the Soviets, etc. But what do they actually end up doing is terroristic incidents against our allies. They blow up a train station in Bologna, 285 people injured, 85 people killed, done and funded and operated by our CIA. They do the 1989 assassination of a guy who's a journalist who's writing about this. They shoot him twice in the head. They do another bombing, 17 people killed. Another one, Oktoberfest in Germany, not Italy, 17 people killed. Why? Because they see that certain candidates are doing well and might become prime ministers, for example, or important legislators. So when you have a big, giant terrorist incident done in some train station, for example, that moves the public toward a more right-leaning government or a more totalitarian government that CIA can deal with, and away from anything where communism can happen. There's the assassination of Aldo Moro. He was a former prime minister, 5 bodyguards. They're all killed. He's kidnapped. A few weeks later, he's shot in the head and put in the trunk of a car. That was done by Project Gladio. In other words, these things were done by the United States to our supposed allies. And hundreds of these leave-behinds operated eventually a 20,000-person army all over Europe. Now, I don't expect anybody to believe a word of it. You got to go to Wikipedia and put in Gladio. It's just one D. And you see that this insanity is true. The punchline on it for me, the one that really blows it out of the water, is that it ended in 1990.
Whoa.
Yeah. And George Bush was president, and he'd been former director of CIA, of course, and he denies it like crazy, but eventually an Italian prime minister really goes to the mat on it. And it becomes so well established that the U.S. government funded and managed these operations, blowing up regular citizens in Europe, that a lot of the people who were imprisoned for them, for those incidents, terrorists, terrorist groups, et cetera, were released on the defense that it was actually done by CIA. I did tell you to put your seatbelt on.
Oh, my God. Is that just like an idea that starts off as a precautionary measure that just got completely out of hand because there was no oversight?
Yeah, no oversight is the key to a bunch of stuff I want to talk about today, because when governments, big centralized governments and other power centers become, without oversight, and where does oversight come from? It comes from us, the public, having to be skeptical. And if the public is not skeptical, if they'll buy a story like, a terrible terrorist group assassinated this guy Aldo Moro, how terrible, and they'll buy the story with no skepticism because that's what we're told, then there will be no oversight, and power centers, it's no surprise, we could talk about every country on earth. I'm not, I happen to love America, but I'm not saying it's just America. It's, this is the nature of espionage and the nature of war. But I want to answer your question about, is it just because of no oversight? the United States doesn't end wars very often. For example, World War II ends, and you're all excited about it, and you're mounting things, and you're doing all this stuff. And then it ends. And everybody's like, hey, but we were really into this thing. And so we don't let them end. We leave 300,000 troops in Germany, 300,000 troops in Japan, hundreds of thousands of troops in South Korea. Why don't we bring these people home? If the war's over, the war's over. But that's not how empire works. And so the U.S. Tends to, continue these wars in the versions I just described to you, which is more secret versions. And it's dark, man. I mean, if somebody, and maybe somebody has, but if somebody came into America and did a bunch of terrorist incidents in America that killed a lot of Americans, oh, geez, let's reflect on whether that's ever happened. But anyway, if that happened, we'd be stressed. And rightfully, we'd, have a lot to complain about. But it goes on, and it's kind of my theme for today is sharing these things that are all available on Wikipedia. I'm not making them up. They're all real, and I looked at them from the point of view of a criminologist, where I really lay out the evidence and my purpose, my reason for doing this today with you, also in a book. My reason is that I really want to encourage Americans to be skeptical, because if you don't have skepticism, the government runs us. We don't run the government.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a strange time for that, because first of all, one of the things that happened was the Smith month, right? So during the Obama administration, when they made it legal to use propaganda on American citizens, that blurred the lines of truth and reality for all of us, forever. And unless that is somehow or another rolled back, and I don't see any effort or any desire to roll it back, we're always going to be stuck in a situation where it's absolutely legal for intelligence agencies to lie to us in the interest of national security.
Yeah, that's where we are for sure. There was, I know you already know about Project Mockingbird, but Project Mockingbird had hundreds of American journalists who were, in some cases, directly on the payroll of CIA, and in other cases just had great relationships and would, float ideas inside the United States. It was shut down by the Church Committee, a Senate committee. And but was it really shut down, or did it just change its name? Because the reality is that today, unlike in the past, all information is international. So if you start floating information overseas that's not true, it's going to make its way to America. And does it make sense to do this? I remember when I was working on an investigation involving Saudi Arabia and their use of Twitter, misuse of Twitter. Twitter ended up canceling like 5,000 of their accounts because they were fake, bots. But they were using Twitter to be able to float things so that they would, become viral and become important.
What time period was this?
This is very recent. This is
so was it X or Twitter? Was it when it was?
It was Twitter,
Okay.
2018, 2019. And they would get things to trend. And how would they do it? Well, when Twitter shut down their bots, they had 40,000 people sitting in their houses, and they would send out the message of the day, like Jeff Bezos is the evil Jew. He happens not to be Jewish. Jeff Bezos is the evil Jew who's robbing us at night, et cetera, because they were in a competition with Bezos over various things. And then it would trend. And so when I saw that happening with Twitter, I thought to myself, well, every country should do that. I don't mean I like it. I just mean it's kind of obvious that if you have an opportunity to communicate with your population in a way that makes particularly young people in Saudi Arabia, they're the ones who are going to come over the castle wall one day, if you can control their perceptions, of course, that's what every country in world history has done. Every country has a narrative, right? Ours was, when I was growing up, and you too, anybody can become president. The government works for us. We don't work for the government, and other wonderful myths. So that was our narrative. India's narrative is, the next life matters more than this one. In the next life, you'll have a good time. Maybe now you're homeless. Maybe now you're one of the 7 million homeless people in Mumbai, but your next life will be better. England's narrative, the class structure. Just watch the king and queen. They're having such a good time, and the princes are having such a good time. That's good enough for you, isn't it? And so everybody has one, and they have these stories about how they control populations, religion being, of course, the big one. Now, government is at war with religion. Our U.S. government is not liking the church anymore, is not liking other power centers. During COVID, you could go to a liquor store, you could go to a Target store, big air conditioning, keeping all the virus nice and cool and moving around, but you couldn't go to church. And even if they put the church outside, they wanted to stop the church. Now, why would governments not like the church? Because it's another power center. And so each power center needs to be knocked down.
But is that why they did it? Because they also outlawed outdoor dining. In Los Angeles, it was outlaw comedy shows.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a pretty cynical answer. Yes, that's why they did it in general if you think about it, the Constitution gives particular protections to the church, to religion, doesn't give particular protections to liquor stores or big box stores, and yet that's what happened. But what about shows, for example? When you have a population that cannot gather for enjoyment, we're all going to the concert and we're going to watch this musical event. And none of us are going to say, oh, that guy over there voted for Trump. I hate him. Oh, that guy over there voted for Biden. That one's woke. That one's such and such. We just enjoy the show, right? We go to the beach, which was prohibited, remember. But we go to the beach, and I look over at you and your kids and your family, and you look over at mine, and we're having a good time. Nobody's judging anybody. We're just there to swim.
Right.
You can divide a country in the way that it happened with us during the COVID lockdowns. That is the source of power. Division is actually the source of power.
But do you feel like this was done on purpose? Did you think that they were capitalizing on the event of COVID, or that they knew that a situation like this is an excellent opportunity for them to divide people further? Or was it just the fact that they had to act at least – they had to at least give the guise of public safety? It had to at least be performative in that they were doing something. The optics that was that they were protecting people from the spread of this disease.
My best way to assess things is rather than ever try to figure out what's in somebody's head, I just look at what actually happened. And what actually happened is that every Western nation on earth put all its citizens under house arrest. Every nation on earth did what no opposing enemy could ever do to the United States. We just had everybody staying indoors, not gathering, hundreds of thousands of businesses closed, people unable to do what they wanted to do, and not free. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's any argument that during the COVID lockdowns, I'm not talking about the COVID disease. The COVID disease is this big. The lockdowns is this big. Mm-hmm. The lockdowns is as big an event as all the world wars put together. The lockdowns caused a complete lesson in government control, that the governments of the world, remember, it wasn't just ours, it was almost every country, could do whatever they wanted. So do I believe it was intentional? Well, I don't have to back up to whether the release of the COVID virus was intentional. I just don't know. But the plans related to what would happen was clearly intentional. Your viewers can look at and listeners can look at Operation. At 201, Event 201 online. I don't know if you've ever seen it on YouTube. It's a video of an event that Gates put on with the CIA, with the Chinese head of the CDC, the Chinese CDC, with military leaders, with people from CBS, and they gathered together and they talked about what would happen in the event that there was a pandemic. And they named the pandemic, and they did tabletop exercises about the pandemic. Any discussion about health? None. All of it was discussion about controlling the information. Why is this interesting? Because it was in 2019, my friend, before COVID came out, right? So late in 2019, these tabletop operations had already been going on for years. So I look at, and I really encourage people to consider this approach, which is forget about who did it, forget about twirling mustaches and villains, forget about Bill Gates and Fauci and all of that. Just look at what actually happened. If we just look at what actually happened, you have to assume somebody wanted that outcome. Somebody somewhere. It might be one person, it might be groups, it might be unaligned people who share incentives. I'll give you a fast example. COVID comes. People who used to make perfume sprayers now make hand sanitizers. People who used to make bumper stickers now make stickers that say stand 6 feet apart. In other words, an incentive comes, and it doesn't require that those people all sat in a conspiratorial room at some hotel in Germany and rub their hands together and make the plan. Human nature, particularly when you centralize big governments, this is the direction it moves in, which is it moves in the direction of tyranny. When I was here before, a few years ago, I made this point that's only been cemented in the interim, which is that if you look at world history as a big pie chart, all of it is tyranny. And there's just a tiny little sliver of the lives we've been blessed to live up until 2020, meaning a tiny sliver of freedom, Western Europe, the United States, and all the rest is tyranny, which means tyranny is the natural order for human beings. That's the way it normally is run.
Yeah, you could easily argue that with history, right?
Of course. And, what you see is, look, any suffering that I've done in the last few years personally has been because of my resistance to let go of the illusions and delusions that I grew up with. The courts will be fair, the government will respect our freedom no matter what, the Constitution will be followed no matter what. It's hard to let go of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and I still have resistance to it. That's why I look at Gladio, which I just told you about, and I say, holy shit, can you believe this? Well, we have to be able to believe all of it.
Yeah, it's just there's so many layers to it. It's very difficult for regular people.
What is a regular person?
Regular person is a person who has a job and interests and family and hasn't spent an inordinate amount of time delving into conspiracies and being rational about it and being objective and saying, I know that every fiber of my being rejects this as foolishness and tinfoil hat bullshit, but is this real? And then the more you find out, oh my God, that is real. The more you find out Operation Northwoods, holy fuck, that's real. The more you find out about these things, MK Ultra, you go, what? Wait a minute. Nobody got arrested for any of this. Nobody went to jail. Nobody got prosecuted. Nobody got tried. The more you dig into the JFK assassination, the more you dig into everything, and it is a bottomless pit that if you haven't breached the surface of it, you have no idea how much depth there is to it, and that's the normal person. Most people. Mm-hmm. Most people took the shot because they wanted to keep their job, or they took the shot because they have to travel to see relatives, or they had to visit loved ones in the hospital, or whatever the reason was. They did what they had to do, and they know people that got fucked up because of the shot. Maybe they got fucked up because of the shot, and they feel helpless and they don't know what to do. But I don't think they understand the depths of, first of all, not just the COVID pandemic, but what happened during the AIDS pandemic with the exact same power structure. And when you find that out, I mean, we went over Peter Duesberg's work the other day. And,
I'm so glad.
Yeah, and we showed the article in Spin Magazine that was talking about these various doctors that stepped out against the use of AZT and like what was going on and how evil it was. And the only reason why they were doing it was because these are drugs that had already been approved and they could just push them through quickly. And they were very profitable. All right, how's your schedule looking? Feeling busy? Got a lot on the horizon? Well, yeah, it's that time of year when life gets crazy and demands more of your energy. More work, more plans, holiday travel, all while it's getting darker and colder. It can really drain your energy, or you can get out ahead of it. Listen, I talk a lot about AG1. It's the daily health drink that can help you stay one scoop ahead of all the energy drains coming your way this season. Because the superfoods and B vitamins in every scoop of AG1 support steady energy production without the crash. In fact, just shaking up one scoop of AG1 in water covers your multivitamin, your pre- and probiotics, antioxidants, superfoods, and more. It's one simple step to start your day ahead of anything that might come your way, and that's why I've partnered with them for so long. Subscribe today to get this clinically backed formula in the flavor of your choice: tropical, citrus, berry, or original, to help you stay one scoop ahead. If you use my link, you'll also get a free bottle of AG D3, K2, and AG1 welcome kit, plus a few bonus AG1 travel packs. Just head to drinkag1.com/Joe Rogan or visit the link in the description to get started. That's drinkag1.com/Joe Rogan.
I think there's a darker reason. And the darker reason for overdosing on AZT is that it provides exactly the symptoms of AIDS that you're going to die from.
Yeah.
And so it keeps the great documentary that's on YouTube is called House of Numbers about this. It keeps the numbers going. Mm-hmm. You can turn the numbers up or down just by changing the definition of what is AIDS. Fauci had his definition, but in that documentary, it's Fauci and Redfield. They're all young. It's one of their first rounds in this world, and they're making the case that HIV is the absolute cause of AIDS, even though literally the guy who got the Nobel Prize for concluding that feels that you can have AIDS without HIV and you can have HIV without AIDS. I've raised 10 kids. I have 2 teenage kids. One of my older boys, but 31 years old now, tested positive for HIV. Right away come the drugs, and he and I met about it. We watched this documentary called House of Numbers. And he decided no medication. He's really healthy. He's in the sun a lot. He's having a calm and wonderful life. He lives in Fiji, so he's out in the tropics a lot. And when he took the medication for 3 weeks, he felt really shitty. It wasn't AZT, it's the newer cocktail. Mm-hmm. But he felt really shitty. When he stopped, he feels great. And we'll see how things go. But the idea that they were trying to push was, if you test positive for HIV, they say it point blank, you will die from this disease, and there's nothing that can stop it except these drugs. And that turns out not to be true.
Well, there's a lot of things you said that turned out not to be true.
Yeah.
They thought that your children would get it, people in the household would get it, that it was spread, that it could be spread aerosol. You know, there was the Duisburg thing is fascinating, because this all took place in the time with no internet, no pushback, no conspiracy theorists online to connect the dots. And his assertion was, first of all, there was the inconvenient fact that the vast majority of the people that got, air quotes, AIDS, all were hardcore drug users. There were these partiers in the gay community. And anybody that knows anything about drug use knows that if you're a hardcore drug user and you're staying up all night and you're partying, guess what? You're going to crush your immune system.
And, they were taking antibiotics, which were at the parties in big bowls.
Antibiotics?
Yeah, because they had this was a tremendous amount of sex. It was almost a statement of freedom in the gay rights movement. And the people had all kinds of infections. So they were scooping up antibiotics and taking antibiotics. And, of course, AIDS is real. They destroyed their immune system, no question about it. And poppers. And Duisburg...
Poppers is the big one, right? Amyl nitrate.
Well, poppers certainly causes the specific respiratory issue that was associated with AIDS. And they kept changing, the NIH and CDC kept changing the definition along the way. And there's a great line in The Real Anthony Fauci, a book I know you read, where Bobby says, if you get diagnosed with AIDS in Africa, the fastest way to get cured is go to New York. You won't be diagnosed with AIDS. Totally different diagnostic method. In Africa, it's mostly women. In the United States, it's mostly men. And the diagnostic method in Africa includes asking you on a questionnaire whether you've engaged in gay sex. What does that have to do with an AIDS test? I took an AIDS test when I was younger and thought, well, this is a test, like a pregnancy test, right? You test positive, that means you're positive. Negative means negative. That wasn't the truth. It was a highly interpretive test. And by the way, this documentary I mentioned a couple of times called House of Numbers, for its humorous value, I have to also add that anybody who looks for it on YouTube, be sure you have the one that is the correct one, because the adversaries have put up another documentary and titled it House of Numbers.
They did the same thing with Turtles All the Way Down.
Yeah, it's very clever. And then that one debunks one debunks the other one. So it's House of Numbers by a great filmmaker named Brent Lueng, Lueng, and it's just a totally enjoyable is not the right word, but informative documentary on another one of these sacred cows that we are not allowed to question.
Well, the Duisburg one was the first time that I ever had someone on as a podcast guest where I got massive pushback. People were like, there's blood on your hands. Like, first of all, who's dying of AIDS in 2015, right? Or whatever year it was that I had him on. But his assertion was that HIV was a weak disease, that it was a weak virus that was only showing up in the systems of people that were already compromised.
Yeah.
It was not the cause of it. It was a symptom of a compromised immune system.
Very poor people in Africa, people with no effective sewage, et cetera. And it was another of many, many movements that has the side effect of reducing population, meaning it use condoms, don't have sex, sex is scary, sex is death. A lot of these things focus on and have the ultimate result of population reduction, which I'm going to come back to, but I want to say something about Duisburg because it's so funny. In House of Numbers, when he's interviewed, he says, my peers are prostitutes. And he says, I am a prostitute as well to some degree. He's talking about trying to get funding. He says, but they go all the way. It's just a funny line. He's a lovely man. Oh, he's doing fine now. I talked to somebody recently who takes care of him. His son takes care of him. I was reaching out to see if he needed anything because I would take care of this guy for the rest of his life. He was a real hero. And they buried him in the I mean, I don't mean buried him dead. I mean, They stuck him in the basement at Berkeley, and he never got another grant, needless to say, in all those years, even though he was headed for a Nobel Prize. He was a great thinker. So I didn't ever see the show you did it. You did it in 2015?
It was probably even earlier than that. What year was that, Jamie? It might have been 13 or 14. I don't remember, but I remember a massive pushback. Like, people were very upset.
Well, you got balls, but I guess you knew that from some other shows. Because doing it at that time, the insult that goes with that one is AIDS denier. No, we're C-AIDS. We're not talking about that. We're talking about whether HIV is always the cause of AIDS.
But there were so many facts that people were ignoring. This is what was like for me when I see a dilemma, I see a situation, and I see inconvenient facts that people are ignoring. One of them being that AZT kills people, and that it was a chemotherapy medication that they had to stop using because it was killing people quicker than the cancer was killing people, and that chemotherapy is always a very short-term use. It's for short-term use. It's like when you have cancer, you take chemotherapy, it kills the cancer, and it almost kills you, and then you recover from it, and hopefully the cancer's gone. This was the only chemotherapy that you were being told to stay on.
For life.
That had never been okay. And so it was one, AZT killed people for sure. They were using AZT for AIDS. People were dying from, AIDS or AZT, whatever. They were dying more. And they stopped using it, and people stopped dying of AIDS. Because that's kind of how it went. Yeah. Because they'll try to tell you that, oh, no, it's the new medications have stopped the spread of HIV. But why did it never make its way to the heterosexual community? If it's really a sexually transmitted disease that's so, unbelievably contagious that it just spread through the gay community like wildfire. Why? There's a lot of people that had gay sex and straight sex. Well, how come it never really had any meaningful transition to the heterosexual community? There's a lot of like weird shit. Why do people that were totally asymptomatic, like Arthur Ashe, gets on AZT and he's dead in 6 months? Like what is it possible that AZT killed those people and that Peter Duisburg is right? This was my thought. And I'm like, let me hear this guy out. Let me talk to him with a skeptical but objective mindset and see where this guy's at. And then you find out he's a tenured professor at University of California, Berkeley, done groundbreaking research on cancer. He's a brilliant guy. And everything he's saying totally, completely made sense.
Yes.
And I was like, this is so strange. And then I realized, this all happened before the internet. This all happened before he could sit on a podcast and talk about it. This all happened before people could tweet about it. This all happened before someone could make a documentary and release it on YouTube.
Yeah, it's very true. By the way, another Duisburg story is that there's a couple that adopted a baby in Romania. They're covered in this documentary, House of Numbers. And they adopt the baby. It's tested for AIDS in Romania, tested for HIV, and negative. It gets to America. They do another test. The baby is HIV positive. So
Are these PCR tests?
yeah, their PCR test.
And this is what Kerry Mullis was very adamant about, that
Yes.
this is not the use of the proper use of PCR, and that Fauci did not know what he was doing when he was doing that. We played that video as well.
Yeah, there's great Kerry Mullis stuff. I wish he was alive. He died right before COVID, unfortunately. But anyway, so they adopt this kid, and the kid is HIV positive, little girl. And the doctors say, well, baby, you got to put this kid on AZT in a hurry. So they put the kid on AZT. Now you see videos, home movies, where the kid can't stand up, is falling, loses weight. And when they go to the doctors, they say, well, it's AIDS, we're doing our best. She's actually doing pretty well. The medicine, is keeping her alive. So just keep going. So they keep going. She gets worse and worse and worse. And eventually they write a letter to a guy they've heard about named Peter Duesberg. And to his credit, man, he was brave. He writes back, in writing, in a way most people wouldn't, take her off that medication immediately. So they do. They take her off the medication. The doctors say she's going to be dead by the time she's 5. Then they say, maybe she'll live to be 7. Then they say, if she lives to be 11, it'll be a miracle. In the meantime, she's getting better and better and better. In the movie, cut to 23 years old, pregnant, having her own daughter.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And there's other people
But
in
it's
the movie.
like they had to know this.
Oh, but this is true with COVID as well. You can be generous and say people didn't know things early on, but it is not possible to now look back, for example, at COVID and the COVID vaccine and say they don't know it now. Right. In other words, at this point, it's not possible for Albert Bourla to say, oh, we had no idea about that myocarditis that would cause sudden death in, kids, athletic boys go to sleep at night and they're found dead in their bed in the morning. Not one, not two, but many. And right in the beginning of COVID, 2 different states with 2 different coroners did 2 different reports that both said these kids who were found in their bed dead in the morning, 16 years old, both of them, 2 days apart, died from vaccine-induced myocarditis. Now, clearly, that should have been the biggest news story in the world.
Imagine if
we were all taking it, right?
COVID happened before the internet.
Yeah, well, things did happen before the internet.
But imagine if that one happened.
Yeah, well, in a way, Joe, it's you could look at swine flu in 1976 and also again in 2009, which were before the internet, and they actually did worse in a way. What the internet did, is favorably allowed engagements like we're having today and all the stuff you've done, but it also allowed governments to have a control mechanism. Right, I was looking for my iPhone, right into our iPhones. And so what was happening is they were getting better and better and better at controlling human perception. And I think it's true that the internet is a great gift on the one hand, but it's also, look, there's no way they're going to leave the internet untouched and not also utilize it in this basically information war that's going on. So the internet has helped show some people the truth, but it's also been used to stop a lot of other people from seeing the truth.
I'm sure, but at least there's an avenue where people can learn the truth that didn't exist before. The Duesberg thing, the only way I found out about it was an article in Spin magazine, and I had some conspiratorially minded pothead friends. They're like, dudes, AIDS isn't real. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course AIDS is real. And then I started reading books, and I was like, wait a minute, this can't be real. This can't be true. And having him on was just absolutely fascinating. But the blowback from all the people that were absolutely convinced that there's no way all of these other doctors could be in agreement and be incorrect. And that gave me pause, because I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Why would all these doctors be in agreement and be incorrect about this? Why would they all be promoting this false narrative? I had no concept of how the NIH and how Fauci and how they ran things, and how if you deviated from the narrative whatsoever, you got no grants, you got no funding.
You lose your license.
And obviously we saw in 2020 people kicked off Twitter.
Yeah.
Like esteemed scientists. Professors, people that taught at major universities, removed from the conversation because they were speaking what Al Gore would call an inconvenient truth.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee Company. Let's get real. Most brands just slap a flag on a label and call it support. Not Black Rifle Coffee Company. This fall, BRCC is doubling down on their mission. From November 7th to 11th, they teamed up with Forgive Co. and Born Primitive to eliminate up to $25 million in medical debt for veterans. Not talk, not hashtags, real relief for those who've served and their families. And this isn't new for BRCC. In 2025, they've backed mission-driven nonprofits like Operation Homefront, Hunter 7 Foundation, Beyond the Barracks, Team RWB, and Folds of Honor, supporting mental health, housing, education, and transition services for those who need it most. So whether you're brewing just black or dark chocolate at home, visiting one of their killer coffee shops, or slamming a can of their new Black Rifle Energy, know this: you're not just fueling your day, you're joining the mission. Hit up blackriflecoffee.com/Joe Rogan. Use code Rogan and get 30% off your order or coffee club sign up. Black Rifle Coffee, veteran founded, American roasted. This is America's coffee.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And there's a documentary right now called, by the way, An Inconvenient Study. See that as quick as you can. It's free on YouTube because some sponsors just paid for it. But that is about a study done by the Ford Medical Center, Henry Ford Medical Center, comparing vaccinated kids to unvaccinated kids. It's a very, very interesting documentary, and after the study is done, they decide not to release it. And
I read about that.
Yeah, it's really good. I don't want to spoil anything, but just tell you some good stuff is, hidden camera interview with the guy who says, I just can't. My career would be over. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Well, people try to persuade him to release the study that yes, it would help a lot of people. I agree it would help a lot of people, and I agree it's important, but I can't. I've had enough. I can't. And he doesn't. And it's so this kind of thing. You got the stomach for another one? I'll give you a big one. So, because you mentioned AIDS. AIDS is like gravity. You're not allowed to question it. It's
right.
It's
the Holocaust.
Yeah, Holocaust, gravity, moon landing. Hitler, by the way, was he killed by the Russians? Well, it turns out the skull fragment belonged to a woman in her 30s. Isn't it a narrative? Meaning, this is the only guy who didn't have an escape plan. Everybody else went to Argentina. They even took whole submarines all the way to Argentina on 2-month trips that were found weeks after the war. They were still finding submarines in Argentina. But this one guy, even though there's a pilot who testified that he flew him out of Germany, flew him out of Berlin, why would anybody lie about that? Well, because the Russians are coming into Berlin, and you've hardly conquered anything if the Osama bin Laden hasn't been caught, if Hitler is free and is somewhere in the world. But that narrative is really interesting for people to dig into, get on Grok or get on ChatGPT. Quick note on ChatGPT and Grok. The first answer you get will usually be the orthodox answer, the approved answer. You have to keep asking. You have to say, look again. You have to push the thing. And then you'll get remarkable information that way. You still have to check it all because the thing has delusions, as we know. But my point is that all these things that we're not allowed to question because they are just facts like gravity. Well, a big one is vaccines cannot be linked to autism. We all know that. That's like we know it, just like we know gravity, just like we know the Earth rotates around the sun. How do we know it? Now, suddenly, when you say, who debunked it and how was it debunked, all of a sudden, nobody can answer your question. Not a single pediatrician you'll ever meet can answer that question. So I'm going to answer it today. How do we know? Who debunked it? It was debunked by the Institute of Medicine. And how they debunked it, I'll talk about in a minute because it's funny. But what is the Institute of Medicine? Well, everybody knows that's a big, important, revered organization all about science, part of the National Academies of Science, government organization. Guess what? Private organization, not a government organization. The Institute of Medicine and the National Academy of Sciences, both completely private organizations, sometimes funded by government and sometimes funded by pharma. And so they debunked it, and the way they debunked it is by having the same way they used for Agent Orange. So why I want to talk about Agent Orange for a second? Is a long answer okay?
Sure.
Okay, if I can even remember the question. But here's the Agent Orange piece. It's good for people to hear because they're not emotional about it, right? They're emotional about AIDS. They're very emotional about vaccines and COVID and what have you. But Agent Orange people have pretty much forgotten about. What happens is Agent Orange is used to defoliate forests and jungles in Vietnam. But it's actually a chemical weapon. The U.S. government denies that it's a chemical weapon, but they know that they tested it. It has dioxin in it, and they tested it on 40 unlucky monkeys. Now, these monkeys in these medical tests, they are always unlucky. They very rarely come out feeling fine. Of these 40, 37 died within a week. So the U.S. government knew they had something here that was quite toxic, but they spray it all over Vietnam, and our troops get very, very sick. They have children with deformities. They come and they complain to the U.S. government, and the U.S. government takes that monkey study, stamps it top secret, and hides it all the way till 2000-something. When they go to the Institute of Medicine and they say, study this thing. So the Institute of Medicine, I'm just going to look at my notes because I want to get it right. The Institute of Medicine does a study, and the conclusion of their 2001 study, very powerful conclusion, more studies needed. That's what they conclude for all these people who are waiting for compensation and waiting to have the answers. To be sure, with that bullshit answer, more studies needed, they do another study in 2006, and then one in 2008, and one in 2010, and one in 2012, and one in 2014, and they all come up with the same conclusion: more studies needed. And this is one of the methods used by the U.S. government to drag things out to where the people who are making the complaint about Gulf War syndrome, also debunked by the Institute of Medicine, or Agent Orange, have died or given up. And there's a bunch of examples of this. And so it took the Institute of Medicine 22 years to debunk this thing. And finally, the very famous Admiral Zumwalt did an independent study. And he goes and testifies before Congress, and I'm going to read it. He says, government and industry officials intentionally manipulated or withheld compelling information about the adverse health effects from Agent Orange. And why was his testimony so important? Because he is the person who ordered the use of Agent Orange, and because his own son died from it.
Jesus.
So you look at that, and then you say, if people listening to me and you now can embrace the idea that, hey, maybe the government does that sometimes, if you can just take that on board, then maybe you can recognize that when the Institute of Medicine does the same thing with the same methods for the same money, paid by the same people with the same experts for the same reasons, then maybe you can say, what about the other stuff they did, like vaccines and autism, which is really vaccines and brain damage, which we know vaccines cause. It's on every package insert for many, many vaccines, meaning they already acknowledge brain damage. The issue is autism, which is a clever definition, very complicated, 12,000 words in the Wikipedia article on autism just to define it, and they fail. 400 citations, and they end by saying, we can't get it. So it's one of these things that you can't hit with an arrow because the definition is so obtuse. But anyway, Institute of Medicine, they did the same thing for cancer from baby powder, which is a great story I want to tell you, Gulf War syndrome, silicone implants, anthrax vaccines, burn pits, and SIDS, all debunked. Now, what do they have in common? The government didn't like it. They were going to have to pay compensation. I mean, some of this is funny. SIDS, how do they debunk SIDS? SIDS is the term, the category that you assign when a baby's death cannot be determined what it is. You've done an autopsy, you've done an investigation, you've dragged the poor parents to the police station, you've done all that stuff, and you cannot decide how this baby died. So the Institute of Medicine could look at SIDS, which is a category of death. You can't be diagnosed with it, you can't die from it. It's a category. And they said, we don't know what causes SIDS, but we sure know what doesn't cause it. Multiple vaccines. That we're sure of. And this is the style of bullshit that goes on.
But there's a correlation in terms of multiple vaccines and the amount of time period afterwards where a baby dies of sudden infant death syndrome.
Oh, I have no doubt that sudden infant death syndrome is often caused by multiple vaccines. I have no doubt about it. And that's for another show. And a lot of it, this book I wrote, a lot of it's in here. Like I really get into explaining that fact. But the broader point is, you don't have to prove SIDS, and you don't have to say COVID vaccines are a problem or vaccines might cause, the mercury in vaccines or other vaccines might cause brain damage. Because once you break the system that they use for this debunking, once you get into understanding how this works, can I tell you baby powder real quick?
Yeah, I know about baby powder.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Johnson & Johnson baby powder, they go to the FDA. And they say, we have to tell you something we're a little concerned about. We have found some cancer-causing asbestos in our baby powder, and we're acknowledging it, and we want to know what to do. And the FDA says, well, we're going to study how much cancer-causing asbestos is okay in baby powder. So they study that for 44 years. And they never consider maybe zero. I mean, I had babies. I'd like zero cancer-causing asbestos in the baby powder. They never thought about zero. But they study it for 44 years because time flies when you're covering up something. And the FDA finally ruled on it in the year of 2024, about 10 months ago, after 52 years. They knew it for 52, I want to say effing, but I won't swear, 52 years. And Johnson & Johnson, by the way, still claims our baby powder doesn't cause cancer, which is the worst advertising slogan in the history of the world.
So the problem was in the places where they're mining talc, the talc and asbestos are often together. That was the problem, correct?
Yeah, but they were able to solve the problem now because there's still Johnson & Johnson baby powder. It's just not made with talc. And they knew this, 52 years ago. And companies like Johnson & Johnson...
Can I stop you? What does
Sure.
the baby powder have in it now? If it
I
doesn't
think
have
it's
talc?
cornstarch.
Okay.
And might be other stuff. I don't know. But, Gulf War syndrome done the same way.
That was depleted uranium, correct?
Gulf War syndrome?
Yes.
It could be a few things. There was also an ingredient in a vaccine given called squalene, which is in childhood vaccines today. It comes from shark's liver, which is what you ought to be wanting to inject into babies whenever you can. And in a minute, I'm going to get into something really funny, but I want to say that when a child dies and vaccines are even a suspect, when it's possible, the powers that be say, look, millions of vaccines were given and those people are all okay. As if they did some, house-to-house survey, which of course they didn't do. But that's not how we handle air crashes. We don't say, oh, millions of passengers are fine. Don't worry about those 400 who are dead in that plane crash. What do? We get the black boxes. We reassemble the plane. We reconstruct what happened. And, they're extensively studied. If we used for plane crashes, my point is the millions don't matter. The few matter. Meaning the ones who suffer. That's where you want to be doing your research, not the millions who didn't have any problem. And imagine that we took the same approach that pharma takes when we have a jetliner crash. Pharma would say, let's say a flight from New York to London goes down in the Atlantic 20 minutes before reaching Heathrow Airport, right? Pharma would say the flight was 95% effective. Right? Or they would say, hey, at least you're better off. We got those passengers closer to London. In other words, they literally put death out of the equation and focus just on this, the numbers. And I don't care about the numbers. I care about the people who are harmed, the individuals who are harmed.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah,
but
please.
What they generally do is they will say it saves more lives than it costs, and that what happens is on a few very rare cases, very rare individuals, there's some sort of a reaction and those people die from that medication.
Yeah.
But this is normal for any kind of medication that is mass prescribed.
Yeah.
This is what they were used as an argument. And they would say that far more people, like for
Were
COVID
helped.
vaccine, were
Yeah.
helped, or measles, mumps, and rubella, whatever it is, were helped by that than were hurt.
Yeah. So, if you're really going to assess a product, like no parent would let a stranger walk up to their baby on the street and inject them with something they don't know what's in it, right? And yet millions of parents do that every year in America by going to Long's or to Walgreens and getting a vaccine. They don't know what's in it.
Right.
And they don't know about that 23-year-old pharmacist assistant who's measuring it out and giving it to you. And they don't ask questions like, did your baby have an adverse reaction to this a week ago or what have you? But I want to go right to your question, which is the assessment that we would have to do for anything, forget vaccines, for any kind of drug, is what's the likelihood of getting, in the case of vaccines, you have to say, what's the likelihood of getting the disease? What's the likelihood of having a terrible consequence from the disease? And does the vaccine work? And does the vaccine have any harm for anybody, right? Well, I just want to talk about a couple of these. Tetanus vaccine. In the United States, the number of people who died from tetanus in a decade is 13. 13 human beings, all old, by the way. The number of people who got tetanus in a decade, 154. My point on tetanus is that all over the world, there's a map in this book, all over the world, the tetanus, how do you get tetanus, first of all? It's not transmissible, as you may know. Everybody thinks you get it from a deep puncture wound with a rusty nail or what have you. Rust does not give you tetanus. It is a bacteria called the tetanus bacteria. And you got to find it, first of all. And you take an army to find it in the United States, by the way. You almost, you won't find a doctor who's ever had a patient with tetanus in the United States. All over the world, it is fewer than 1 in a million people. In the United States, in all of Central America and South America, all 22 countries, you can't find it. Fewer than 1 in 100,000 people getting tetanus. I'm not talking about death. In Russia, 1 death in 2022. In all of Europe, a few deaths. But in the Congo, a lot. So this is one of those things that you have to ask, what's the likelihood of risk? And you have to say, does it work? And does it work without any side effects? Well, here's the reality. If I get a serious injury, deep puncture wound, right, and I go to the hospital, they clean it, and I'm done right there. Cleaning it is the end of it. But let's say they failed to clean it well. They always offer you a tetanus vaccine anyway, right there, even if you had one a year ago. There's never a circumstance where they don't try to get you to take a tetanus vaccine. So tetanus is the beautiful vaccine you can take at the time of the injury. You don't have to take it prophylactically. 5 injections to little babies. Little babies. You don't have to do that. So each one of these vaccines, each one of these is a different product. And so polio, by the way, as I head down the polio rabbit hole for a second, I want to say it is another one of these sacred cows, right? Because everybody says, you don't want polio coming back.
Right.
But here's the reality of polio. Right from the CDC website, 99% of people who get polio never have any symptoms.
I know, that's crazy.
The typical symptom, you had Humphreys on, so you know some of that. The typical symptom is having a cold for a week, having sniffles. Number of deaths in the world, planet Earth, 8 billion people. Number of deaths last year from polio, you want to guess?
30. 0.
Number of polio cases of the real terrible outcome, which is paralysis, which is the only bad outcome, 500 on the planet Earth, half of whom recovered. You can recover from it on top of everything else. So you have 99% won't have any symptoms. Of the 1% of them will have poliomyelitis, which is the paralysis. And of the 500 I just told you about, 564 in 2022, 97% of them were vaccine-induced poliomyelitis, meaning they were the strain from the vaccine.
Yeah, that's an inconvenient truth.
That's an inconvenient truth right from the CDC website.
Yeah, when you tell people that, they go, wait a minute, what are you saying? Yeah, the vaccine is giving people polio. And, Alex Jones, of all people, told us that on the podcast a long time ago, that they had to stop giving it to children in the Congo because they were getting polio from the vaccine.
It's the only place they were getting polio.
He pulled up an AP article, and we're watching this AP article where it shows us oral administration of polio to these little children. And it turns out a bunch of them got polio from it. And it's something like, of all the cases of polio, I believe it's 94% of cases are vaccine-induced polio.
97%.
97.
Yeah. And by the way, even people hearing my voice right now and yours who can go to, the CDC website or who can look this up. In this book, by the way, I just find a random page here, but all the pages have, I don't know where's the camera, all have QR codes. Right? Mm-hmm. Everything I assert in this book takes you to the original source material. So you can decide whether, you don't have to trust me on anything. But on polio, people just won't let it in their head. Right? And the reality of it is that it is very unlikely for your kid to get polio. And let's look at mumps, by the way. So mumps, you'll find a CBS story online that shows that they say most mumps cases are in vaccinated children. Then you dig a little deeper. What does most mean? 94%. So now you've got a vaccine that doesn't stop mumps. I mean, would you take any other product where they say, this will help you to whatever your sickness is? 94% of the time it won't, but you might be one of that lucky 6%. The point is that I believe, as a parent myself, that parents have to look at each product individually and decide how likely is it my kid is going to get this thing and what are the consequences of trying it. Like with COVID, it's so easy. With the COVID vaccine, your child stands zero benefit and just might die, right? And so that's the easiest equation in history. Like, I'm not willing to have an easier case of COVID for my 14-year-old and maybe, even though I'm admitting it's very remote, and I mean very remote, but maybe have the kid die or have the kid have myocarditis and die in 5 years from it. I mean, the number of athletes that drop dead in play during games, I'm talking about high school athletes, is higher than it has ever been in the world. And they say, oh, no, it always happened. Well, I studied that in my last book, and it didn't always happen. It happened 26 times a year over 32 years. Do you know that during COVID and after the vaccination, 2021, 2022, and 2023, we didn't have a single month that was 26 cases of sudden death of a young person? And so,
How many were there?
Well, I've got 550 just in that book, Cause Unknown. And that's just they're hard to find because you only can find them in local newspapers because the national papers wouldn't report it. And, there are some cases that were kind of obvious, like Justin Bieber getting the paralysis on his face and his young, healthy wife getting a brain bleed. So there were some that weren't hideable, but those people didn't come out and say, oh, that was related to the vaccine or I took the vaccine. I don't know Justin, by the way, at all, but I know people going to his concerts were required to take it, so I don't know the answer. But what we do know is that the 500 real cases, all with citations, 550, that I put in the book Cause Unknown that Ed Dowd did, he did the statistical work on it. We have a citation for every single one of them, and it's only people under 45. And you know what people under 45 usually don't do? Drop dead. Right? Healthy, and particularly children and athletes. And so with the COVID vaccine, mRNA vaccine, when you've got the actual, original developer of the technology, Robert Malone, dead set opposed to it. When you've got Luc Montagnier, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering HIV, dead set opposed to it, spending the last few months of his life touring around unhealthy, saying, do not give this to your children. Then over here you've got these authoritative sources. And the authoritative sources tend to carry the day if people are, and I don't mean it to be too mean, but I want people to hear it, if they're lazy. Because if you're a parent, vaccine is not a single product. It's not a brand. It's a whole bunch of different things that each have different risk profiles and each have different benefits. Take polio. There's 6 different polio vaccines on the market. Are they all the same? Of course not. They have you got to choose, right? Or you go to the pediatrician and the pediatrician tries to give you your MMR vaccine, or the flu vaccine is a better example. Flu vaccines still had mercury in them until Bobby Kennedy, and they lied and said they took it out in 2001 of all childhood vaccines. On the same page it says, except for some flu vaccines. So there were 6 flu vaccines. And their defense was, oh, well, parents can choose if they want it with mercury or without mercury. This is like comedy. The pediatrician doesn't ask you whether you want it with mercury or without mercury. Right. And what parent would say, oh, I'll tell you, give me the one with mercury. I'll take that one. I mean, mercury, for God's sake.
I think it's important to point out about when you're talking about polio that it's also the widespread use of DDT.
Yeah. You mean causes? Oh, of
Yes.
course.
This is a big one.
And not
People
polio,
talk-
by the way. It
Right.
might just be Guillain-Barré syndrome and other forms of paralysis. Even, sorry to interrupt, but even President Roosevelt probably didn't have polio. And yet he's the poster child for polio.
Right.
There was no polio test, and he got it in adulthood, which is not normal for polio.
Right.
He was paralyzed. That's true.
And this DDT use, it didn't just give human beings polio. It was giving farm animals polio, dogs, cows, horses. And they don't get it. They don't get polio. They don't get the polio that we get. So it's not that it crossed species. That's not what happened. It's most likely that people were getting DDT poisoned because they were spraying it everywhere back then.
Yeah. And by the way, also starting in the 40s, using mercury everywhere. The very earliest autism cases were called Kanner's syndrome because of a doctor who discovered 8 patients who all had, he took care of a lot of kids, and he found this new syndrome that he was seeing about their behavior. They had lost their ability to speak. They had all kinds of problems. And in almost every case, the father was working with mercury, or mercury was being used in agriculture at that time. Mercury was like this, this wonder product because it's effing effective, that's for sure. It does shit. And so it was in a lot of things. So mercury is part of a lot of neurological injuries, and it's, go on ChatGPT and say, should I breathe mercury fumes? No. Should I eat it? Touch it? No, no, no. Should I inject it? Pause, pause, pause. Well, in childhood vaccines. It's just ridiculous. I got a quick one I want to tell you. So I'm going to get a lot of shit, obviously, for this. And what's the main criticism you and I are both going to get? I'm not a doctor.
Right.
I'm not a scientist. As I mentioned, I'm a criminologist, and I speak English, and I read very well. And so in this book, I put together the information that anybody can get and put all the citations there. But what parents often don't know is that this brand, vaccine good, disease bad, there's a ruse in there, there's a marketing ruse, which is that if you don't get the vaccine, you're going to get that disease. It is absolutely impossible for your kid to get all of those diseases or be exposed to all of those diseases. And what Humphreys didn't talk about with you, but she knows, is that all of the childhood vaccine diseases, all of them, the survival rate for a healthy American child is 100%. All of them.
Yeah, that's inconvenient, right? The measles.
Well, let me do measles real quick because for 22 years, we didn't have a single measles death in the United States. For 22 years. And this is really interesting math. I hope people will take this one on board. The death rate for vaccinated children with measles is 0. And the death rate for unvaccinated children, of which there are 9 million in America, is 0.
But
Meaning the unvaccinated and the vaccinated both have the same death rate, 0.
But people have died from measles.
Yes, people have died from measles. But all of these diseases, the death rates that are the scariest are old death rates, right? First of all, measles was in descent anyway up until, as it headed into the 80s. It was already going from, up here to down here on the graph.
Why is that?
Indoor plumbing, better nutrition. The same thing that helped with almost every disease. Here, Texas
announces second death.
But this is 2024, and what I said was in the 22 years before that, there had not been a death.
So what's causing these kids to die?
Well, it's I don't know if you've had Pierre Corey on or other people, and I'm not. This would be a medical question about whether these kids actually died of measles or died of poor medical care.
Died with measles.
Yeah, died with measles, et cetera.
They
By the way,
other comorbidities?
These
kids?
Well, they had bad treatment. It's a question for like somebody like Pierre Corey. I'm going to back away from the question. And by the way, let's own it. Let's say, they died of measles. If that's true, then in 24 years, 2 kids died of measles. You know what the death rate is for kids from tetanus, for example? The risk is that 1 in every 154 million Americans, children, will die from tetanus. And if you want to make those odds better with a vaccine, more power to you. But 1 in 154 million is pretty damn good odds.
And then again, very important what you said, that it can be taken, the vaccine can be taken once you have contracted tetanus.
Well, no, once you've got the injury. You don't have to wait. If you've got the injury, but there's a ruse here, which is that deep puncture wounds does not mean tetanus.
Right.
Right? You got to search for it. And as you'll see in this book, the chart that shows the prevalence of tetanus in the world is an interesting one. But I want to just quickly talk about this because I'm ready for the shit that I'm not a doctor and I shouldn't be saying any of this. My view is not only should I be saying it, but I should be doing exactly what I've done for my whole career, which is investigating matters and telling the truth. And I'm not even, by the way, an anti-vaxxer. I think there's one vaccine I think is a great product, by the way, the BCG vaccine, which is for tuberculosis. It is used in almost every country on earth. It's 100 years old, and it has other health benefits. It helps with other respiratory problems, and it helps with bladder cancer. It has all kinds of benefits. Guess what country it's not used in?
The United States of America?
That's a good guess, Joe. The United States of America. And why? Because
Can I guess?
yeah, please.
Will the patents run out?
It might be another reason, by the way. You might be on something. No, they would say, well, there isn't that much tuberculosis, but there's 9,000 cases a year.
Versus tetanus.
Versus tetanus with 13 cases every 10 years.
I don't think most people know that tetanus is a bacteria.
Yeah, it's not transmissible. And many vaccines don't stop transmission anyway. By the way, I'm not saying they all don't work. I'm just saying you have to make a decision. Like, imagine this. Some parents don't want their kids to play football because they might have a head injury, right? But if the government mandated that you play football, we'd all be pretty pissed off. Parents decide whether their kids can, take the bike out after sundown, whether they can sleep over at somebody's house. They make all these decisions about safety, but they give over this vaccine decision as if it's not their business. Right. And, something that Bobby Kennedy is pushing for and I think will accomplish is called joint decision making. And that is that the parent and the pediatrician will decide together on whether or not vaccines, when to give them, how many, which type, et cetera. Guess who opposes that? The pediatricians. Right? They don't want
because of financial incentives?
Holy shit, yes. When I was a kid, I went to the pediatrician. Well, first of all, I went to the doctor once. I broke my foot. If you didn't have vaccines and Bobby's wellness checks and little Jamie's wellness checks that are necessary, that they bring you in to get the vaccines, pediatricians would have to have second jobs, because most kids, particularly when they're younger and they're not yet affected by all the environmental toxins, most kids are pretty healthy. Obviously, that's less true today than it was when I was a kid. But I want to share something that I'm itching to get out, because most people just don't know much about vaccines, and there's information that's all available through CDC and FDA, et cetera, that I want to share if you give me permission.
Sure.
Okay. So how does it start? Vaccine. It means, it started from the word cow, vaca. It meant cow. So they would take pus, cow pus. You don't want to waste that stuff. And they would rub that into wounds on people. And then they decided, maybe we can put horse pus and cow pus from an infected horse's hoof. We'll rub that in. And they tried that. And for a long time, they were experimenting with all these things. Some old-timey vaccines were made by, I'm going to read it so I get it right, steeping them for years in a mix of ox bile and glycerin and potato slices. Sounds like a joke, right? But it's true. But science moved on, and it evolved to where vaccines included dried rabbit spinal cords, duck embryos, chicken blood, human bile, because you don't want to waste that, ground up rat spleens, and boiled pig skin. So that's old-time vaccines before we knew anything about anything. So let's switch to the modern-day vaccines, because obviously now we're real smart and we know a lot of stuff. Well, here is what's in your childhood vaccines right now. Gelatin from boiled pigskin, kind of like the old one. Chicken embryo protein. Blood from the hearts of cow fetuses. DNA fragments from human fetuses. Oil extracted from shark livers, I mentioned earlier. Proteins from worm ovaries, because you don't want to leave that out. And, of course, DNA fragments from monkey kidneys. Now, if that doesn't sound like a Shakespeare play, that eye of newt, toe of frog, lizard's leg, tongue of dog. When I hear that thing from Macbeth, I literally, can't you just picture Gates and Offit and Hotez sitting around in their witch's brew putting this stuff together? I know I'm talking fast. I'm almost done. The other modern ingredients in childhood vaccines. This is what you are giving if you trust the vaccine manufacturers. Formaldehyde, we already know that's bad. Polysorbate 80, which is linked to infertility. And my absolute favorite, potassium chloride. Why is this my favorite? Because that is the chemical that is injected as the third injection in lethal injections by executioners. Now, admittedly, infants get far less of it than people who are executing, but we really want to be injecting any amount of that into human beings. Sodium borate, Triton X, that's what's in spermicides, and of course, until very recently, ethyl mercury.
And what is the reason why they have so many different ingredients?
So I got it in this. I got it in this book. Holding up, shameless plug. I got it in this book because it's too long for now. But they have. You can get it from ChatGPT. They have, what I would have to call a kind of insane reason for each of these. Right? I mean, you just heard what they are. I mean, they're nuts. And people say, well, I'm not a scientist. You don't realize how very important each one of those ingredients is. Well, I do realize something, and I don't have to be a scientist. I don't want mercury injected into my kids, period. When I was a kid, if a light fell and broke on the floor, you had to call a hazmat team to get rid of it because it had mercury. You can't touch it, you can't breathe it, you can't eat it, but you can inject it into babies. It's crazy. And vaccinologists, there's a degree of mad science here. There's a degree of craziness. And again, I'm still not anti-vax. That's not the point. The point is learn which products you think matter because they're not all the same.
And what are they saying is the reason why they have all these different ingredients like monkey kidneys and...
Well, some of them are, it's not, the one that's not funny, of course, is SV40.
Right.
Because simian virus 40, most people don't know, was in the first polio vaccine, which was recalled. And then it was in the second polio vaccine, which was put out to replace the one that had simian virus 40. It was in that, and it's in the Pfizer COVID vaccine. SV40 fragments.
And if you could explain how that happened.
Well, they will claim that that to grow the pathogen needs to be in some kind of organic material and that monkey kidneys is a good way to do it. So simian virus 40 they claim, got into it. Let me tell you what they claim for mercury, because it's a good story too. They say that it's a preservative and that they needed it for multi-dose vials of the flu vaccine. Not legal in the UK, not in Denmark, not in Sweden, not in Switzerland, but for some reason in the United States it's okay until Bobby Kennedy took it out. That committee that Robert Malone is on, the ACIP committee that decides on childhood vaccines. So why is this stuff in there? Well, two reasons. One is that once they get a vaccine approved, the last thing they want to do is come back to the FDA and start that process all over again to get a better vaccine approved.
Because it'll cost billions of dollars.
Because it'll cost a lot, because it
takes a long time.
And it won't get passed.
Right.
Right now, the ACIP committee, it's happening right now. There's a new Moderna vaccine. And the ACIP committee is saying to FDA, give me all the information on this vaccine before we approve it. And there is no viable safety information on these vaccines, particularly the childhood vaccines. There never was. As you learned from turtles all the way down, never a viable study on these. And the studies they did would be some of them for 5 days, some of them for 14 days. And I'm interested in going a little longer than that when it comes to my kids, meaning to know whether they had adverse reactions.
Well, they'd always say that there have been numerous studies and that these studies are published. And then when RFK pushed them on this and forced them to reveal the fact that, no, there weren't any studies that showed it.
Yeah, and they had never done a study. There are now 3, but not done by the government, of comparing vaccinated kids to unvaccinated kids for all health outcomes. If you give a kid a measles vaccine, it'll stop him from getting measles for many years. It works. But does it also have other adverse effects, right? So the 3 studies have been done, and many, many more problems among vaccinated kids unrelated to the disease, therefore. I'm talking about asthma and ADHD and neurological problems and visits to the pediatrician. It's the easiest study in the world to do because you go to a big company like Kaiser, they got the kid, they know he went in for a vaccine or didn't, and they know how many visits he had to the pediatrician. And so they can look very easily at it. It's not a hard project to do, and that's what Bobby and Del Bigtree both went to get done by CDC and NIH, and that's the meeting where Fauci said, oh, yeah, I have that study. And he did this, looking through a file box. Oh, I can't find it. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
And then they had to sue to get it, And right before showing up in court, they get the letter, oh, there is no such study.
Yeah.
Lying, I can't say the phrase. Lying bastards. I can say that one, right?
Yeah. You can say whatever you want.
Motherfuckers.
There you go.
Thank you.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, and not just a lying motherfucker, but a lying motherfucker with a pardon. It goes back to 2014.
Yeah, and why would it?
Why would you even do that? Why would you give a doctor who saved millions of lives from the pandemic, why would you give him a pardon?
That goes back to 2014.
It seems insane. It seems
Yeah.
insane that you would even need something like that.
I'll add one more ingredient. He wasn't charged with anything.
Right.
So pardons are typically for people who are charged with something, not
Right.
for people who might be. So it's, By the way, you'll have to I know I'm talking fast, and you'll have to tell me how we're doing on time. But
We're doing great.
Okay, thanks. In this, a lot of this stuff is dark, and I'm like anybody else. I'm subject to getting bummed out by like, holy shit, this stuff goes on, and I'm getting a little better because if I accept that it's true, I stop being shocked and I stop being vulnerable to the impact of it. What are you doing on that subject? How do you deal with it? Humor is a good answer, by the way.
Humor is probably the number one. Yeah, I give myself lots of other things to do, and I think about other things. I just try not to dwell on it too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can get really bummed out. You can get bummed out by the depth of the corruption and how many people who are intelligent people who think they're doing the right thing have become ministers of propaganda, whether they realize it or not, and how easy it is to dismiss anybody who asks questions about these very questionable things.
Yeah.
It's very disturbing, and it alienates a lot of people. There's a lot of people that I can't talk to about certain subjects because they'll just spout out some propaganda and some nonsense, and I have to go, that's not true. And it's provably not true. I can show you in 5 minutes that that's not true. You know how many people I freaked the fuck out when I told them that 99% of polio is asymptomatic? And I go, I'm going to show you right now. We'll just put it in Google, and then I just show it to them.
Yeah.
Like, how crazy is that? That's crazy. And then you get a little of them opening their eyes, but then they go right back into the trance for the most part. Most people go right back into the trance because it's too difficult to admit that this entire system is insanely corrupt and it all functions by money and incentives. And they are more than willing to not just give people bad health outcomes, but sacrifice human lives that would not have died because of profit. And they do that in a huge number of humans. There's a huge number of humans that will die this year because someone has decided that telling the truth is inconvenient because it stops them from making a profit, and so they will lie, and they will prescribe things that don't need to be prescribed because there's incentives, and there will be all sorts of, besides death, all sorts of horrific health outcomes that could have been completely avoided. And then completely ignore any study like the Henry Ford study or any of these other studies that show that, like when they study the Amish, when they find out the only Amish that turned out to have autism are the ones that were adopted.
Yeah, and vaccinated. I actually think there is only one case like that.
Yeah.
And so the Amish have, I don't remember the numbers, but it's like 70,000 times less autism when you do all the math.
Yeah, what the hell is that? And how is that not freaking people out? Like, how many people will just bury their head in the sand and say vaccines do not cause autism? This has been debunked.
Yeah, debunked.
You know, I follow Peter Hotez on Twitter, and they'll just spout it out and then go about their life. They'll put their blinders on, fasten them securely to the side of their head, and plow forward. That's the majority of people. Because there's a reality about human beings. Most people are cowards because they haven't had to not be a coward. They haven't had to test themselves against something terrifying. And so most people, when they encounter something that's scary, they fold. Most people. That's why we admire people that don't. Yeah. That's why you see like professional fighters, like, oh my God, like the courage that you have to do that. That's why you look at Navy SEALs that way. The courage you have to sign up for that when it's terrifying for people. So most people when they encounter any pushback, any social ostracization because you're part of that kooky group of people that wants to question medical science. They don't want that. They don't want to not be invited to the cocktail parties. They don't want to get the side eye at the gym from people. They don't want that. I got to see it during the COVID, even with my children, because they weren't vaccinated. And their friends were saying, why aren't you vaccinated?
I thought you loved your kids.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they are vaccinated for everything else. But my skepticism on COVID came in waves. Initially, I had zero.
Me too.
Initially, I almost took it. The UFC allocated 150 vaccines for all of their employees. I'm one of their employees. I showed up. I called the doctor. I said, can I get it today? And they were going to set it up, but then they said, no, actually, we have to give it to you at the clinic. Can you go there on Monday? I said, I can't, but I'll be back in 2 weeks. In that 2-week time, they'd pulled it from the market. It was a Johnson & Johnson. And then 2 people that I knew had strokes that took the vaccine in the 2-week time. And I'm like, whoa. So then I hit the brakes. And then when they offered it again, I was like, no, I think I'm good. And then my family got it. And then I didn't get it. And I was like, I thought everybody gets it.
You mean got COVID?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody got it. I hugged my kids. I had sex with my wife. I tried to get it. I didn't get it. I was like, she's like, you're going to get it. I'm like, I'm not getting nothing. And I didn't get it. I had 2 days where I felt crappy. Not crappy, bad, but like when I worked out, I didn't feel strong. So what I did was I just worked out with lighter weights. I did like 35-pound kettlebells, and I just went through a very easy routine where I just got my blood flowing. And then I said, let's see what I feel like the next day. It was like I was running a science experiment on myself, but I was also going crazy because everybody was like locked down. And you need some. Good?
Well, this is live TV, folks.
Yeah. So then I realized, okay, well, you can contact it and be in contact with someone who's positive and not catch it.
Right.
Okay, so what is this? And then Jamie got it and Tony got it. A bunch of our friends got it, and they were fine. And my family was fine. My kids got through it like that. That was the nutty thing. Like one of them had like a little bit of a headache, and she came home from school, and then she tested positive. And she was sick for a day, maybe 2 days, with no medication, like nothing. And then the other one had it for maybe 4 days. She wasn't feeling so good. And my wife got it a little worse. She got it for about a week. She didn't feel good for about a week, but it was never scary. It was always like, God, I feel so bad. Is there anything I can get you? Do you want this? Do you want that? But one of the things that we did was IV vitamins, not for the kids, but certainly for me when I got it. And I tell that to everybody when you get sick.
Yeah.
If you get sick, get IV high-dose vitamin C, get zinc, get vitamin B, like you will feel so much better. And if you can tolerate it, get NAD. I know a lot of people like NAD bugs them, it freaks them out, it doesn't feel
Get in the
good.
sun.
Get in the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true too.
Which they told us to stay out of the sun for all of COVID.
If you have access to red light therapy, that's great as well.
Well, I think you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, well, I clearly became one. But I mean, the ostracizing of people that have different perspectives was a real thing, and I felt it. And I didn't just feel it from people that I knew, which I did. I felt it from fucking CNN, I felt it from the White House.
Yeah, I saw.
And I felt it through, but it was kind of cool because it was lies. It was like, oh, you changed the color of my face. You think you're going to get away with this? Like, how stupid are you that you don't think people are going to notice? There's a giant difference between my Instagram video where I'm in my backyard just talking normal, and then you make me look jaundiced.
Yeah.
There was also the Rolling Stone thing where they showed the people that were waiting in line at the emergency room because so many people were having horse dewormer. With gunshot wounds. They were waiting in line, a long line outside. Fucking Rolling Stone.
I know.
And they were saying people were getting overdose of horse dewormer, which, by the way, no one got an overdose of horse dewormer.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, no one's taking. You can get ivermectin online, you fucking idiots. And back then, you could get it in a pharmacy until they shut that down. Like, why would you shut down the ability to get a very useful medication? Why would you do that? Like, how do you know why this person is getting ivermectin? What if they have fucking malaria?
Yeah.
What if they have, yellow fever or something where they're using ivermectin? by the way, got a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, they had a very good reason for shutting it down, which is
Right.
that if there is a medication that is already approved for any purpose, then you cannot get an emergency use authorization.
Exactly.
And the emergency use authorization was everything. You know, that answer you just gave me to my question, which was how do you do it? Because you're hearing, as much as I am and more in this room from people. And that is the very reason I wrote this book, because I wrote it to be able to hand and to let people whose eyes are more open to things hand this to their sister-in-law or brother-in-law or boss or friend or neighbor who's questioning everything. Right. Because this is designed to carry you through Agent Orange. Nobody doubts it because it's now established. Carry you through baby powder, now established, and show you each one of these things and then talk about vaccines, and then talk about other products, and then talk about the other examples in order to inspire skepticism. Now, can it work for everybody? Of course not. But I mean for it to be a helpful, persuasive strategy, because I've been in like you, been in these conversations, which I now just avoid. Right? Because there's a particular thing people say that used to piss me off. I let it roll off me now, but it would be, that's not what I heard.
Yeah.
As if that means something. And so what I do is I never talk with somebody without an open laptop. Right? I'm not going to just hear, well, that's not what I heard. No, so you open the laptop and I'll show you. Right. So like in this book, at the beginning of it, it says something like note to the reader. It says, here's why the QR codes are there. When you encounter something you don't think is accurate, cross it out with a big, bold red pen. But right next to it, what is accurate? Because without that step, people get to say, I don't think so. Well, then what is it? Right. So I'm adding that step. And then with all the QR codes, you can decide what's true, what's propaganda, and what sources you want to believe.
Well, it was weird because publicly they were stating things that go absolutely against known and established science.
And common sense.
But when it comes to pandemics,
Yeah.
one of them, the big one, that has always been said, you do not vaccinate during a pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other one, which is the value of natural immunity, which has only been known throughout medical history, they suddenly said, no, Hotez and others would say, no, you're better off to get the immunity from the vaccine that happens to come with these few side effects. I mean, it was.
But it's also what I was getting at with the don't vaccinate during a pandemic, because you create variants. Especially with a leaky vaccine, which clearly the COVID vaccine was.
You think?
They lied to us at first, and they said it's going to stop infection, stop transmission, period. Oh, great. It just works, period. Step in line. Let's do this. It just works, period. Yeah. But it didn't just work, period. So that automatically would create the possibility for the environment for variants. And then people publicly were saying that the unvaccinated are causing variants.
Yeah.
Which is wild. What a wild twist of reality and decades of research.
Yeah, the unvaccinated were the Jews in Nazi Germany. We were the worst thing in the world. We were the problem. We were spreading disease. By the way, since I mentioned that, it's a good little digression for a second. There's a book called Hitler's Professors. And it is about a process that Hitler administration used. Remember, they're in power for 12 years before they start killing people with industrial killing. And they would have professors and universities do research projects and publish them that said Jews spread disease. And then they would say they damage the economy in these ways. So using medical science is not new as a way to control populations and as a way to influence. So by the time you get to 1942 and the population is sort of geared up for this degree of anti-Semitism, I'm not saying there wasn't anti-Semitism on its own, but it was exploited and exposed to radiation in this process. I want to share two other quick things. When I have trouble with these topics, and I wonder, are people dark enough to sit in a room and say, yeah, it causes myocarditis mostly to young boys, but let's put it out anyway, and let's just not say anything. I had real trouble with that. And a dear friend of mine is the novelist Bruce Wagner. And when I brought this to him and I said, I just cannot get over this hump. I cannot believe that people knowingly do this. I just can't get there. And I'm not I'm a skeptical person, so I want to be able to believe anything. And he said, well, have you read the conference at Bonsi? Have you? Do you know what this is?
No.
And I said, no, I never heard of it. He said, go to Wikipedia and read the conference at Bonsi. Read about that. And so the conference at Bonsi is a conference in 1942 where Hitler's top soldiers and intelligence people meet with the civilian government, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Health, Minister of Transportation, at this place called Bonsi. And they lay out what's coming. They lay out the plan for what are we going to do with the Jews. And these are just, civilian guys who have cars and drivers and are sitting in suits and have kids playing in the yard. And they slowly lay it out. And for example, somebody says, then we're going to move them by train, 400,000 of them. We're going to move them by train. And the Minister of Transportation says, whoa, 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 we don't have enough seats on the trains. And Hitler's guy says, we're not using seats. And it's slowly beginning to drop. And these guys thinking, what's up? So they have this conference somebody transcribes it, and the transcription is leaked, a little bit like happened in my book. I got great leaked transcriptions. And you see these people talking about something that in the beginning they're using euphemisms, relocation camps, and then they have a little wine after the meeting is over, and they stop the euphemisms, and now they're talking about, well, what is a Jew? What if the mother is Jewish but the father isn't? What if he's a half-Jew? What if he's an adopted? So what do we do with these? What do we do with that? And these people who walked into the room with no idea what was coming are suddenly participating for all the reasons you mentioned earlier about normal people, right? Got a job. They don't want to be, excommunicated. And so the conference at Bonsi is the example that helps me remember that, of course, human beings get in a room together. Every war we do. We make movies about them. They get in a war, they sit around a table like this, and they say, well, we're going to lose 60,000 troops in the first 3 weeks, or we're going to take out this many but by this method. And generals, war generals, they actually, it's not the perfect wording, but I don't have better wording. They look forward to the first casualties. Because the first casualties of our troops is what invigorates the war movement back home. They stormed into our camp at night like cowards, and they killed our boys, and you have to support our boys in this war. Well, if you really wanted to support our boys in the war, you'd leave them in Philadelphia. You wouldn't send them to Iraq. But this is how this works, and there's no surprise that people sit around a table and think about what's the best weapon, what's the best weapon methodology. That's human life. That's part of human history.
And they also think, what's the best way for us to make money? And is it going to cost human lives? We'll just do it. I mean,
and what's the best way for us to control people?
Right. By the way, clearly did that with Vioxx when they found the emails that showed that they knew about the side effects, and then the quote was, "But we think we will do well with this."
I got something worse for you than that.
Really?
It's right. It's
60,000 people dead.
I got something worse than that. Good timing. Here's Pfizer. I'm just going to say these are the companies we're trusting to make the vaccine products that we're injecting into our babies, and a lot of them, including on the first day of life for a disease the baby can't possibly get because the mother's tested for hepatitis B anyway. Pfizer. So they get fined for illegal marketing of products. The company's forced to pay the largest criminal fine in U.S. history at that time, plus $1 billion more in a settlement in 2009 for the False Claims Act. And I almost forgot $240 million in criminal fines and another $190 million in 2004 for false claims to Medicare, and $60 million and $40 million and $75 million for fraudulent marketing, $15 million for paying kickbacks to healthcare providers. That's Pfizer. Johnson & Johnson, who's a really trusted company, to some people, they got fined $5 billion for what I already talked about, which is the baby powder, $4 billion, I'm sorry, and they had to pay out all kinds of court things. But they got a $5 billion fine for multiple states for its role in the opioid crisis. And, you can decide if I'm overplaying this because they got deceptive marketing, downplaying the risks and overstating the benefits of their products, false claims made to mislead doctors and patients and regulators, tricky promotion, et cetera, for distributing fentanyl products and failing to adequately warn about the risk of those products. They're $4.7 billion criminal fine in connection with baby powder. $2.2 billion in penalties for illegal marketing and kickbacks. Now, I know this is boring, so I'm going to rush through it. GlaxoSmithKline, same thing. All kinds of criminality. GlaxoSmithKline had 700 middlemen who were bribing doctors. And one of the companies that I talk about in the book, the sales guy comes to the CEO and he says, I got a great idea for our product. Most of the pharma companies are paying doctors to go around and give seminars, touting the drug, right? He said, let's cut that out. Let's go right to pay the doctors to write the prescriptions. It was called bribe to prescribe. We'll pay the doctor to write the prescription, and then he'll send it to a particular pharmacy, and it's for drugs the patient doesn't need, and then we'll get a kickback from the pharmacy as well, plus we'll sell our product. The CEO of that company hears that. He slaps his hand on the table, and he says, we just got our new VP of sales. Jeez. Right? They've been convicted, by the way, under the RICO Act. Merck, other than Vioxx, which caused perhaps 200 deaths in America, they get a $650 million.
Wait a minute, I thought Vioxx was like 50,000 deaths.
No, you go online and you'll get a whole different group of numbers.
But it had to be more than 200, wasn't it?
No, I said 200,000.
Oh, you
Sorry.
said 200. I thought you were talking about 200. Period.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay,
too.
I had read 60,000.
Here's a good one.
Really, 200,000?
Yeah. Here's a good one from Merck. And by the way, it could be 600,000 for all we know. You think somebody's running around trying to do that number accurately at the CDC or at Merck?
Well, let's say the low end, 50,000.
I thought the low end was 100,000, but it's bad.
It's still insane.
Here's an interesting one from Merck also. A bunch of whistleblowers came forward at Merck, and they acknowledged that their flagship product, which is the MMR vaccine, that they tested it against a variant of mumps that doesn't exist in the wild. And guess what? The MMR did really good in that test, right? And it came back that it could pass all the requirements to be included. They added rabbit blood to human samples in order to pass that test.
What?
Yeah.
Why did rabbit blood help them pass that test?
Science. Who knows? Now they barely do that. Eli Lilly, criminal fines of $500 million, then $800 million in settlements. This is the last one I'll do. For a product of theirs called Zyprexa. Right? Now, why did 32,000 people sue over Zyprexa? Why were they so pissed off? Was it because Zyprexa caused swelling in the hands and the feet and the arms? A little bit. That pissed off some people. Was it because it caused problems with swallowing and drooling or the twisting body movements that lots of people reported? Sure, some were pissed off about that. Was it that it caused stroke and heart attack? I'm reading, by the way. Probably that explains some of the resentment. But ultimately, what really pissed people off was the big side effect of sudden death. But Eli Lilly made a good decision pushing Zyprexa. Because even though it cost them even though it cost them billions in settlements, they made $40 billion in revenues.
That's the same with Vioxx, right? They
Of
made
course.
$12 billion in revenue, and they got fined $5.
And last 31 years that I cover in the book, pharma manufacturers paid $62 billion, but they made trillions. And most of them are repeat offenders. So the question is, why in the world do we trust these companies?
It's a very good question.
I was hoping you could answer it.
There's no
Apparently
answer.
not.
People are lost in the trance. That's
Yeah.
what it is. They want to believe.
And the one product, by the way, where they have no liability, you think that's the one where they suddenly get careful?
Right. That's what's hilarious about it. And that people push back against that, how imperative it is that they have liability against being liable.
Yeah.
Liability against whatever damage they do, liability against lies. It's just crazy that they let them do that because vaccines cannot be both safe and effective. Is literally what they said when they were pleading for the immunity.
Yeah, I forgot to mention earlier because you asked why are some of these ingredients in the vaccines.
Yes.
So on mercury, they claim that it was a preservative for the multi-dose vial of flu vaccine. But there's another ingredient you need in a vaccine, and that's called the adjuvant. And that's what bothers the body. That's what gets the body to say, I don't like this. I'm going to mount an immune response.
Right.
And I'm quite confident that mercury, just like aluminum, which is still in lots of vaccines, childhood vaccines, that mercury's purpose in there was that it really pissed off the body and it got the numbers to work for these vaccines. In other words, the immune response. They're claiming it's, they make so many claims. They claim that it's such a small amount it doesn't matter. Even though
and then there's the difference between ethyl mercury and...
Well, that's their big claim. The big claim is they say that ethyl mercury is different from methyl mercury, which is in fish. And comparing two kinds of mercury is like saying, would you rather be shot with a 38 or a 45? I mean, I'd rather just not be shot. But I want to just talk about this methyl mercury thing. What they claim in this nonsense that they're inherently different is that ethyl mercury, the one in vaccines, clears through the bloodstream more quickly than methyl mercury. And they're right, it does. That's been tested in monkeys, and it's true. Problem, where does it end up? In the brain. And it collects, and it doesn't clear, and it lasts for years. So that part they don't want to talk about.
Right.
And again, somebody's going to say, who the hell, a lot of people are going to say, who the hell am I or you?
All this information's available. You can find it.
That's right. So, but I don't mean that. I mean, they're going to say, why am I talking about this?
Right.
Well, because the fucking doctors aren't. Because
Because doctors can't if they want to stay being doctors.
That's true, too. And also people need to know, when you call your doctor and you ask for information on this, they just go to the CDC website, right? They're not scientists. They're not in a lab coat conducting science. In this book, I have a chapter called Ask Your Doctor, and it's questions to ask your pediatrician in person. Because if you ask him an email, they're going to give you an answer they just got offline, right?
Right.
But if you ask them in person, what are the ingredients of childhood vaccines? You think there's a pediatrician out there who can read the list I read to you? You're not going to find that person, because they also bought into the idea that vaccines are a product that's uniform across the board, vaccine good, disease bad, and it's their business. It's what they do. I'm not blaming them.
And they have a license to conduct business and make billions of dollars, and you want them to stop for ethical reasons.
Yeah, and they're in a priesthood.
Right.
And
that is what it's like.
They get all their respect, and it's like a religion. And all these truths that you can't talk about. I am now, having done your show today, assuming that you air it, I am now officially questioning pharma companies and the Kissinger report. I don't know if you heard about that one. That's another real good one to add to your list of MK Ultra and others. You want that one?
Yeah.
I don't know how's our
Kissinger
time.
report?
It'll kick your ass too. It's unbelievable. 1972, Kissinger report put together by CIA and USAID. And it is a report that concludes that the United States official foreign policy, signed into law in 1975 by President Ford, and when I say signed into law, it's called a presidential directive, is the reduction of population in 12 specific foreign countries. Not the control of population, the reduction of population. And so it explains the ways we're going to do this is through medicalizing birth control. Never was before. You didn't need a doctor to get a condom. And to go around and talk to villages everywhere and say, you want a reproductive health freedom, don't you? You know what most women want on the planet Earth? Babies. They're not looking for reproductive health freedom was a term for have fewer babies, right? There is a very potent move in official U.S. foreign policy to reduce population in other countries. Now, why? Philippines or Indonesia. Why? They state it directly in the Kissinger report because it's classified. They wanted to reduce those countries' development so that they wouldn't need their own raw materials, because we want them, the metals, et cetera. It is dark as shit, the Kissinger report. It's not classified anymore. You can ask ChatGPT about it to give you quotes from it. And so this whole business of population reduction is now another third rail I'm stepping on, right? Nobody wants it. What are you nuts? No, a lot of people want it. A lot of people believe, obviously including Bill Gates, that 8 billion people was the number where we must turn it around, which is where we are supposedly now. And the Kissinger report, I was a kid. I didn't write it. I didn't make it up. You can find it on Wikipedia. It's a real thing. And all the presidential directives that came from it. Would these countries like the idea that we show up and we say, hey, we've got a new tetanus vaccine for you, but it happens to also have in it, secretly, something that will reduce fertility in your women, as we did in India, as we did in Peru. In both India and Peru, we also did forced sterilization surgeries. U.S. paid for them. True story.
So the one vaccine was the DTP vaccine. Is that what it was?
The one I'm talking about,
The one that had
the
HCG
sterilization
in it?
It was just tetanus.
But there was a vaccine that was in Bobby Kennedy's book where they were talking about women in Africa where they were unknowingly given this vaccine against
that's
it was
correct.
Diphtheria, tetanus.
Well, it was the tetanus part
Right.
that they were pitching. And by the way, tetanus is a challenge in those countries more than it is in the United States. But yeah, they were calling them wellness drugs. And
but they had HCG in
That's
it.
correct. And
that HCG, and they were more administered to women than they were to men.
Oh, of course. And there were 5. They would administer 5 of the injections.
And they did it under this. The narrative was that women were more vulnerable, so you have to give the vaccination to women.
Yeah.
And it was preventing them from getting pregnant.
It was preventing them from getting pregnant. And they had a World Health Organization, which basically has this as a mission. Man, I wish they would sue me for saying this, but they have this as a mission, which is population reduction. From the beginning, they had worked on that HCG.
Well, Gates famously was in a speech saying we can do that with vaccines.
Yeah. By the way, in the Kissinger report, for those of you not seeing this and only hearing it, that pause was me drinking water. I did not have a stroke. In the Kissinger report, they list the strategies and how much funding they'll give to each strategy. One of the strategies is to medicalize birth control, meaning have trusted people in the villages, et cetera. Another one is to pay young men to have a vasectomy, just outright pay, write a check in villages, so they get $60 and they get a nice weekend of buying beer, but they never have kids. But another one of them is injections that temporarily reduce male fertility. Now, here's an interesting thing about that one. It's in the Kissinger report. Injections that temporarily reduce male fertility. The COVID vaccine reduces sperm count in men for 3 months, admitted by Fauci. It's not a secret. But the CDC's response was, yeah, but it's only for 3 months. But they were asking us to take one every fucking 3 months.
Well, also the miscarriages.
Miscarriages and stillbirths. My point is that it's no surprise that these persistent thoughts that I think good people believe, meaning I think there are good people who believe that population reduction is important. The fact is, of course, that now we are barely at replacement value right now in terms of many populations. Countries like Japan, South Korea, they're under replacement numbers, meaning they're not having enough babies. The entire population of the planet Earth could fit in the state of New York. I'm not saying it would be a pleasant place, but I'm just pointing out that the Earth is very big, and I'm not persuaded that overpopulation is the issue. I do think an issue is distribution of food. That's a big one, meaning how we distribute the resources we have is affecting a lot of people. But whether I agree or I don't agree is irrelevant. A lot of people believe in this very strongly. The woman who founded Planned Parenthood, which I gave and still give money to. The woman who, she was into population reduction. By the way, when I said a minute ago, still give money to it, the last one was 2 years. Now, I probably, all these things are changing in my head, meaning everything I thought is subject to reevaluation. And maybe that's how we ought to live. Which is to not lock into these positions where we think we know.
Well, I think part of the problem with some poor countries is they don't have great infrastructure, they don't have great power grid, they don't have great manufacturing, they don't have great government, right? Well, the only way you're going to generate wealth is if you have legitimate power, you have reliable power. Well, what's the most reliable power that is clean? Well, that's nuclear. Well, the problem with that is when you give people a nuclear plant, they didn't know how quick and easy it would be for it to convert to now they have nuclear weapons. That's how you get India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
Right? They both have nuclear weapons. Why do they have nuclear weapons? Because somebody decided to build nuclear power plants there.
Yeah.
So you can't have the whole world have nuclear weapons. It's pretty nuts how many people have them as it is and how we haven't used them.
Well, we have used them, of course. Only the United States has used them. Yeah.
We haven't used them since, since World War II. But this thing, this unsurmountable problem of providing energy and infrastructure, when you hear things like the Kissinger report, where it's like we want to make sure that they don't develop to a point where they start using their own materials because we need them. So let's fuck up this entire – whatever the progress was going to be, let's halt that.
Yeah, and do it in the name of showing up like we're here to help, and we're here to do something wonderful for you. You know,
God, it's so dark.
You got time for? You got time for a funny one?
Yeah.
Okay, this one will be funny. I promise.
Time.
All right. So, in the Institute of Medicine report and study that they did on vaccines and what they called autism and I'll call brain damage, it's a closed session, right? And the very first thing said is this optimistic pronouncement. The closed session transcripts will never be shared with anybody outside the committee and the staff. Well, that turned out to be way wrong because somebody leaked the transcripts, which is why a lot of them are in my book.
How do we know they're substantiated? How do we know that they're the absolute transcripts?
Oh, the provenance of it, they've been now around since, I think, 2009 maybe was when there was the beginnings of articles, and nobody's come and said, like Bobby Kennedy published on them, and nobody came forward and said, wait a minute, I never said that. And you can see, you can tell they're real by both what they say and also what they end up with, which is equal to the report they published. But this was meant to be secret, right?
Okay.
Now, the second pronouncement they made, this one was dead on accurate. The point of no return, the line we will not cross in public policy is pull the vaccine, change the schedule. We wouldn't say compensate the injured, and we wouldn't say stop the program. Then another one says, CDC wants us to declare, well, these things are pretty safe on a population basis, and we are not ever going to come down that autism is a true side effect. That is the first hour of their study. That is the first hour when they sit down to answer the question, which is, might mercury or other ingredients be causing autism in any children anywhere? And
read that quote again.
Let's go back
the autism
here.
Quote.
CDC wants us to declare, well, these things are pretty safe on a population basis, and we are not ever going to come down that autism is a true side effect.
The CDC asked for
the
a
CDC
result.
paid for the
But they specifically were requesting a result.
Yeah, and everybody kind of knows it. You know, one of the doctors asks, are we going to look at mercury? And the answer comes back fast, saying not this round. Now, this is the first study that the U.S. government is doing supposedly to find out what causes autism. But what they're actually doing is finding out what doesn't cause autism, right, which is they already know is going to be vaccines. And one of the doctors says, wait a second, not this round. If we're going to look at autism, can we really fundamentally look at it in isolation? In the real world, they, meaning the injections, don't occur in isolation. Individuals that got the MMR vaccine also received the vaccines with mercury. Right? So that's a very good point he's making. What happens to his point? Immediately, a guy named Dr. Berg interrupts. And this is where I think it's funny. I'll try and do it without cracking up. But this is what Dr. Berg says. He says, I don't know how long it will take for us to figure out what the question really is. I'm a veteran of one panel that took 6 days for a group about this size to figure out what the question was. It can be a formidable issue. I don't know what the question is, whether it is MMR or whether it is measles vaccine. And somebody tries to answer him, and he says, excuse me, we're going to have a method for how we focus the question. This is one of the questions we need to focus on. How are we going to form the question? What process are we going to use to form the question? The issue of specifying the question is a very important step. I would like to know how this panel is going to specify the question. In other words, this guy is a fucking chucklehead. And this is what he's obsessed with and talking about. And the next guy, Dr. Goodman, he talks all through the thing, and he's impossible to understand. Literally impossible to understand. Here's his quote. In the end, the bottom line is, the only verdict that matters or is of importance is whether we say a causal relationship between vaccines and autism is likely or suggested or unlikely or inadequate. That is the only metric. As soon as we start introducing any other words that sort of sidestep to causality, but we're not going to say causality, I think we would introduce confusion. Now, I read that 30 times writing this book. I don't understand what the fuck he's saying. That's all they do is introduce confusion. And they sit there for day after day after day talking not about science. They're scientific experts talking about words.
How do they focus?
What do you
kind
mean?
of Adderall are these guys on when they're having these conferences? I mean, I can't even
I'll tell
imagine
you.
staying awake during listening to that guy say that.
They barely do stay awake because one of them says, if we want to subdivide the categories, and boy, did they ever want to subdivide, then I think we have to use, there seems to be a strong association which we can't explain, or we don't have any other explanation for it, or, however, we don't want to make a causal claim because we know from many observational studies, blah, 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 blah. He actually says blah, 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 blah. That's what they know from observational studies. And we shouldn't put it in the sufficient category because their fear was that people would be afraid to take vaccines, right? Now, you asked how they stay awake. They don't. They quit early and they take a massive break from all the subdividing and language prose bullshit they're doing, and they go away for a few months. And then they come back, and one guy says, you know what we should say? We should say maybe if it happens, meaning autism or brain damage, it happens maybe once in 1,000 times, maybe once in 10,000 times, maybe once in 1,000,000. In other words, without a calculator, this guy just went from a rate 1,000 times different. 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 1,000,000. He's such a genius that he can accomplish that. I mean, it is an embarrassment. There's one point.
That's crazy that's the numbers he was throwing around.
Yeah.
Let's just give them a
Give 'em a
narrative,
number.
give them a voice of authority
Yeah.
that tells them it's very rare, don't worry about it,
Yeah.
and then we're good.
And it's not a bad idea. Of course, it's deceitful, but it's not a bad idea. At one point, by the way, one of the guys, Dr. Johnston, he says, this is a good one too, Dr. Stato. He says, let's take the top category from vaccines, the second category from Agent Orange, and then in between, let's put the top from Agent Orange and the second from vaccines. Voila! And like they've solved their problem. But one guy says, like he's reciting Hamlet. He solves the problem. He says, this is what we're going to say. We're going to say our information is inadequate to accept or reject. That is a statement. And then they work on that statement for a while. And there's this woman named Barbara Lowe Fisher who offered them a lot of information that they rejected. They turned it down. And here's what they say about her in the meeting. They say, all we are going to get from her is a list of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids who were developing normally, but they got their MMR vaccine and then they started to regress. In other words, all we're going to get is exactly what we're being paid to sit here and do. That's what America was asking them to do. And so all these, I'll just do one more. There's a guy, Dr. Goodman, and he says to the group, I've got something big. He says, he says it's not, it's still sort of rough, and then he rolls out this big invention of his. I call it the 3-category system. That is high, intermediate, and inadequate, with the other 2 categories being no evidence at all or favors acceptance. And he says, what we're looking for is an argument that is embedded inside the rhetoric, an argument that might be of some value to parse out and take pieces of and make sure that we address it in its pieces. That's like a fucking Scrabble set that turned upside down. It doesn't make any sense. But I'm not a scientist, so I shouldn't be able to opine on it, but that's why.
But it's clear what they're doing. What they're doing is trying to make that water as muddy as possible.
And they come out with their report, and not only do they come out with their report saying that there's no link between any vaccine and any autism in any child, not only that, but they say it should not be further studied. These guys who will do study after study after study for years because they're getting paid for it, on this one they decide no more studies. I mean, it's quite remarkable. And that is the thing that allows everybody to say to you and to me and to Bobby Kennedy, oh, that's debunked. That's how it happened. That's the debunking. And what I'm trying to do is show how the sausage is made in these debunking campaigns, and it's not pretty. Sorry. Say something optimistic.
There's nothing optimistic after that. But it's just until those kind of people are no longer able to do those kind of things, we're going to continue to have new versions of this problem. And there's going to be new things that come up that freak everybody out.
Yeah, of course. And, you asked at the very beginning, did I think that some of these things were intentional or were they simply exploiting the opportunities that came? I now believe that very few things are purely organic events. That's what I believe. In other words, any giant social movement, like COVID is a giant social movement, I'm not talking about the virus, I'm talking about the response. This is not accidental. This is not people, oh, we thought this and we tried that and we were just doing our best to figure stuff out. That's now impossible, that theory.
Do you think that the virus was released intentionally?
I'm open to the idea, that's exactly the one, by the way, that I went to my friend Bruce Wagner and I was suffering over. In other words, can people do this kind of stuff? But then you learn that we dropped infected ticks on Cuba, that Lyme disease is likely the result of experimentation.
Now, people have pushed back on me about that one recently because I said that on the podcast, because Lyme disease has existed forever, right? Like there's versions of Lyme disease. It's like very ancient. That's true, right?
I don't know. I only know that.
But there is the reality is Plum Island.
Yep.
They were doing bioweapons research, and one of the projects was taking ticks,
of course,
and infecting them with different things, so you could drop them off of helicopters, infect a population, and overwhelm their medical system. This is established, right?
Yep, that's true.
And Lyme Island was right outside, or Plum Island rather, was right outside of Lyme, Connecticut.
That's all true. And so is it possible? It's a little bit like the big...
It's also like, why would you defend that?
Defend it in what way?
Why would anybody say, oh, Lyme has always been around? Okay.
Oh, because...
it's never been ubiquitous. It's never been a disease that infects ticks and everybody gets it, and the entire population has chronic fatigue syndrome. That's not normal. That's new.
Yeah, I moved out of New York State. I had a beautiful place there, and I moved because I got Lyme disease, and my kids got it, and I just couldn't, every time I go for a walk in the forest, have to think about, this tick that's on you.
Oh, I had a friend get it, and his child got paralyzed. He got face paralysis.
Yeah.
The same, the Guillain-Barré, whatever it's called.
Guillain-Barré,
Guillain-Barré. I only see it written. Guillain-Barré, his child got it when the doctor was unwilling to admit that the kid had Lyme disease because the bullseye, the little thing had gone away.
Right.
Which is, the doctor just, he's fine. And then eventually got to the face paralysis where they started giving him like high doses of antibiotics. But my friend, both he and his son, he suffered badly. He lost like 50, 60 pounds. He looked fucking terrible for a long time.
It's quite serious. And, there was a giant outbreak of polio, certainly the biggest and most important one, happened in New York. And there, too, the Rockefeller Foundation was working on funding gain-of-function research on polio to make it worse.
Yeah, we've talked about this.
Yeah, nowhere on the planet Earth had there ever been another outbreak like that. And the reason that polio, was fatal to some people is because of the paralysis piece. But as you said, the paralysis may very well be the result of insecticides and other modern pathogens. And so it's all, you asked me the big question, do I think it's intentional? My easiest answer is that I can believe almost anything. I obviously do not know the answer to that question, but I think it's intentional that they were doing gain-of-function research against the objection of many people, including President Obama, opposed it, and they offshored it to China. Many people wrote articles against it. It is quite literally mad scientist insane.
Yeah.
It's quite literally insane to say,
literally.
can I make something worse than nature might, because it might make it one day.
And not have a fucking cure for it while you're doing that.
It's never worked, right? They've never done the thing of having...
But that wasn't the research. The research was making the virus worse. The research wasn't, let's make a cure for a virus.
Well, it's both, because the research was make bioweapons. That means make it worse. But the defense for bioweapons is the dream of Dr. Daszak, who should be in prison. Please sue me, Peter Daszak. Please sue me for saying that. I have the resources to address this lawsuit with you. Anyway, the research he was doing to make bioweapons and to make something worse included, and he made a pitch to the Pentagon on it, included having a vaccine that would make our troops able to walk in immune.
Science fiction.
Right, science fiction, but it's very sexy science fiction, because ain't that the greatest war ever?
Right, but
we make them sick, but we don't get sick.
But they didn't have a vaccine, so they had the disease, but they didn't have a vaccine that was effective for it.
But he wanted to work on it, and he wanted.
How long were they working on it? I mean, you think about the virus. If 2014 was when they brought back, that's the date where Fauci is immune, right? That's what. It's where it goes back
Yeah.
to, right? So that must have been the time where
was.
they restarted gain-of-function research.
Yes.
Like, how long were they doing it before that? Like, how long have they been doing it? And they
back to-
never had a vaccine.
Back to paperclip. I mean, back to the very beginning. Look, humanity, the history of humanity includes that the greatest funding will always go to weapons. And so scientists they weren't always in the position they're in American society and Western society today, but they became very important because you could figure out things like nuclear weapons and bioweapons. And if you have bioweapons that are ethnically targeted, that'll be a big advancement. And there's no reason in the world to believe that China, Russia, the United States, and other superpowers aren't working on that.
Oh boy!
And we are, we would vote against it if there was a referendum, right? We, meaning you and me, and maybe Jamie. I can't tell about Jamie.
He would.
Okay, would you, Jamie?
Jamie's a good guy.
Okay, he's raising his eyebrows. I don't know what to think. But anyway, I think probably most intelligent people would say, yeah, let's not do that.
Right.
And in fact, most intelligent people might say, if we could go back and not have nuclear weapons, let's go back to that. That would be a nice thing. Certainly, people have tried, but scientists tend to get their best funding. I mean, look, there's a bioweapons lab at the University of Boston, a high-level one. What the fuck? I don't want my kid going to the University of Boston. Like, what are we doing that for? They're all over the world. There were 60 of them in Ukraine, funded by the United States, and we think we want to wonder why Russia might not like what was going on in Ukraine. By the way, speaking of Ukraine, I keep asking if I have time. Do I have time to tell the Zelensky story?
Sure.
Because it's another one. It's just, what is Zelensky? In America, he's a hero. He's a real warrior. He's got that nice green, warrior suit on. And here's the truth. And people know parts of this story, but they don't know it in its cleanest narrative. So he was a totally apolitical. He was an outsider to politics, zero experience or interest in government or politics. He was a comedian, and with no manifesto, no party ties. And he does a TV show, a planned TV show called Servant of the People. And the main character in the show does a YouTube video that calls out oligarchs and corruption and eventually becomes popular and is drafted as a protest candidate and eventually becomes president. So Zelensky played on a TV show a person who becomes president by popular demand. In real life, the TV show is supported by an oligarch named Kolomoisky, who owned the TV channel. And Kolomoisky did a huge nonstop promo on that TV show to make it the #1 show. Primetime slots and ads everywhere and crossovers with the news and what have you. 2018, a year before the show goes off the air, Zelensky forms a political party called Servant of the People, the same title as the show. And in no press release, secretly done, and then he does another season of the show. And in April of 2019, he announces his actual candidacy on Instagram. He has no campaign, no rallies, no real platform. He skips the presidential debates. Others attended. He avoids press conferences, and the few that he did in the beginning were really bad. And Kolomoisky's TV channel gave Zelensky's campaign endless airtime and favorable polls and went after his enemies. The U.S. intelligence agencies, CIA and NSA, helped, U.S. spending $5 billion, by the way, on democracy campaigns in Ukraine, funneled through NGOs. And USAID embeds advisors in his organization to help with the campaign. I'm almost done. And on Election Day, Zelensky wins with 73% of the vote. And then the war happens with Russia, and he declares martial law, and he ends elections. There's supposed to be an election in 2024. That's what we get for our democracy money. And quite literally, he is an actor in a carefully designed television show. He is a construct, like Epstein is a construct, meaning he's a created entity. And it worked. That is Zelensky, American hero. I guess his star is maybe fading a little bit now. I don't know. What do you think? Is he still wildly popular in America?
Well, I think people are very disappointed by the fact that the wars continue to go on and the deaths, the amount of deaths. I mean, people are horrified by it. And that's a big failure of the promises of the Trump administration too, because Trump famously said that he would get it done in 24 hours. But
Yeah.
you can't get it done at all.
Yeah, it's tough.
And
It's a
they're
tough one.
conscripting 60-year-old men and
Yeah.
setting them to the front line. I mean, it's
and Americans and people from all over the world to go and fight. And but the narrative, I think, your very first question was, do people do this on purpose? Things like this, like wars that are multi-billion-dollar events, they are not organic. They do not just happen. Putin does not just decide one day, hey, I got an idea, and to go into a part of Ukraine where they're Russian speakers, they're culturally Russian, and they are not organic events. It's not how people get into power in many countries around the world.
Well, the crazy thing is the narrative that the soldiers in Russia were being told, that this was going to be over very quickly, they're going to be welcomed, and then, they had dress uniforms in their packs.
Yeah.
They thought it was going to be a couple of days. Storm in, storm out. You're a hero.
Yeah. We were told that in Iraq, that we will be welcomed in Iraq as soon as we get to Baghdad.
So what do you think the Ukraine thing is really all about?
Well, why limit it to Ukraine? Just talk about human war. I mean, what is human war always about? It's about primacy and control and wealth. And 1,000 years ago, there's about 1,000 what you would call government systems, right? There's warlords and there's shoguns in Japan and there's all these little entities. In our lifetime, it's down to 190. But is it really 190? It's more like 5, right? NATO and China and the Soviet bloc when it existed and the oil-producing countries. In other words, it's getting to be whatever number you want to make it, but eventually it'll be 2 fuckers sitting in a room and then they got to kill each other.
Right.
And then, that is the decay of empire. And we have 760 military bases overseas. China has 1. And I'm not saying China good, U.S. bad. China's got different methods for the shit they're doing. But you asked me, what's this war about? And I think we should never talk now anymore about individual wars and their narratives, because it's just a reality of human beings and human history that all wars are justified. Every single war is justified, right? It just depends which narrative you want to choose. Ukraine has a perfectly good narrative. Russia has a good narrative, and the U.S. Is kind of the weakest narrative. We're at war with Russia is what it boils down to. Right? Wars now are electronic. And so the U.S. is currently at war with Russia, just using the bodies, the meat grinder of the Ukrainians. But we are firing missiles. We are providing the signals intelligence. We are providing the satellite information. That is how war is fought today. And it'll be more and more. Look at the drone attacks. The drone attacks that Ukraine supposedly accomplished. You think any U.S. technology might have been involved in that?
No chance.
No chance. I knew it. So I apparently am a conspiracy theorist. What I want to be, by the way, is just I don't have the answers on these things, but I want to accept in the time I'm 71, in the time I have left on Earth, I want to accept that these things are part of humanity and part of the human nature, particularly when you have big centralized governments. George Carlin had a great joke. He said, it wasn't even a joke, we said it on the Tonight Show. He said, I really love people as individuals, but as soon as you get 2 or more together, I can't stand them. Right? So political parties, governments, all of that stuff.
Well, large groups,
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Well, there's a diffusion of responsibility too. You can kind of that's how corporations can function. There's so many people, you don't feel bad for what you're doing. You're part of a greater thing. It can't be stopped.
Congress is like that. We'll declare war on some country, and no one person is responsible. But I would like to say something optimistic, Joe, and that is that what COVID did something. The disaster of it, I'm not talking only about the virus. I looked at my life and said, what are the things that I'm grateful for today that didn't exist? I made a strong commitment to travel with my kids because we were told we couldn't. and I'm very grateful for that having happened. I lost a lot of relationships, as I'm sure you did, and we both will after this talk today. But I also made some of the strongest relationships in my life. I mean, people now who you or I could show up at their front door in a crisis at 2 a.m. and they'd let us in.
Yeah.
And so,
well, you found out who's courageous.
That's a very important piece, and the heroism of that. You are one of the people who has given me optimism and hope because you put it on the line in a way that that most people don't, and governments didn't like it. Powerful governments didn't like it and still don't like it. And so those relationships, I think, they give me optimism. And also, a dear friend of mine said, when you think of the worst things that human beings do, you should also think of the lofty things they do at the same time, which is heroism and supporting each other and loving each other.
Yeah.
And our willingness, yours and mine even, to talk about this stuff, publicly, is neither one of us is claiming to know all these answers.
Right.
But we're asking questions, and apparently, there are consequences for that.
It's also, there's a reason to do it because it's not being done. Like, if you're looking at mainstream media, if you're looking at all these very respected newspapers and television shows, whether it's the New York Times or the Washington Post, why isn't this on the front page of their newspaper? Why isn't this the lead on their television show?
Because they are deeply corrupted, and probably right after pharma, they are the most responsible for the suffering that people went through. During the COVID years, 6 million people died from just regular things in America alone because their families couldn't be with them, right? You had a whole year in which you couldn't go to the hospital and hold the hand of your father. I had that, right? I could not be with my father when he died. One of the most important passages in our lives is to be there for each other in that time, just like childbirth. And so these are dark outcomes. And in America, we have more of an opportunity to resist than most other countries do, and I hope more people will be skeptical and will do it, and that there's hope in that. I mean, there's optimism in that, but I just have to let go of all of my beliefs that this is outrageous. Meaning, this is not outrageous. This is the way things are.
It's normal.
Yeah,
it's normal. We were just very delusional before COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly was.
Me too. I was as gullible as the very people that I look in the car and see the guy with 2 masks in the next car. I was just as gullible, just different things.
Well, it's also sometimes it's like something like this happens, and at what point in your life does it happen? I mean, if it happened to me when I was 20, I probably would have had a way different reaction than when I was 53. It's just, at that time in my life, I was like,
of course.
I don't trust you guys anymore.
Yeah.
I've already seen enough bullshit from you guys. I know this can't be 100% what's going on, but the extent of the deception, I never would have imagined.
Yeah.
The extent of the corruption, I never guessed. I thought the doctors were great. I never thought I never thought they were ever doing anything that would be bad for your health just because there's a profit incentive. I never thought that.
Yeah,
I was a little skeptical about some surgeries. Like, some surgeons want to do surgery. I'm like, I think you could rehab that. But other than that, I never thought that there would be this level of corruption with pharmaceutical drug companies and the government.
Maybe this is a blessing to come out of COVID because it was very persuasive. I can get pissed off at many things. One of them is that no human beings ever pay a penalty for this stuff.
Right.
Right?
Even if it's just money gets...
Yeah. Albert Bourla, what does he care about a fine, criminal fine?
They don't care. They're still making so much money. And people are still fucking taking it. That's what's
right now
crazy.
Today, sure.
There's ads for it. I've seen an ad where a lady has like 2 Band-Aids. And once she goes, I got my flu and my COVID all in one shot. Like, why?
It's a good question. And by the way, the smallpox vaccine, which I talk about in the book in the context of showing that we know a lot about it because it's old. And it lists the people who are most vulnerable to problems from the smallpox vaccine, which is a nice service for the CDC to do. Meaning, if you have any of these conditions, be watchful of the smallpox vaccine, which is not a popular vaccine, obviously, unless you have a smallpox outbreak. What do they list on there? Diabetes. Oh, well, there's 65 million Americans. Family history of heart disease. You know somebody who doesn't have a family history of heart disease?
Right.
Meaning everybody in America, it's perfectly safe for, except everybody in America. Now, the reason I'm mentioning it is that's the vaccine that they rolled out for monkeypox, same vaccine. And 1 million people took the monkeypox vaccine. And the government was trying to get monkeypox to be as scary as, as COVID.
Yeah.
But they couldn't find anybody with monkeypox. They kept showing the same hands with monkeypox, and there was some African kid, and they couldn't find anybody with it. And so eventually most people didn't care, but 1 million people lined up. And then CDC said, how about 2? I think we should do 2 of these monkeypox vaccines. That should be the regimen. And so people are scared of, throughout history, there were always witch doctors in every village, right?
God. The monkeypox one was wild because there was really only promiscuous gay guys that were getting it.
Well, and only 6 of them. I mean,
4 guys died, right?
Yeah, you got to. I don't even know about that.
I think 4 guys died.
No, I mean, we're told 4 guys died.
Yeah,
that we can be sure.
That's right. But it was a thing where they were trying to spread it. Like it was a new epidemic that was going to run through the country.
No, it was like AIDS. It was going to run through.
And they tried it twice.
Yeah, I know.
They tried it once and it didn't take, and then they tried a second time.
And they changed the name as well.
What is it now?
Let's think what it is.
Monkey's offensive.
No. Monkey was a little comical. Monkeypox didn't sound serious enough, so they changed it to something else. Pardon me for not remembering. During the Biden administration, they changed it to something else. And they tried to roll it out, and this, what is it here?
According
Mpox. That's a good sound.
That's right. Mpox.
Mpox. That sounds a little scary, doesn't it? Now that I've seen the word Mpox, I think I might get that vaccine later today.
It's better. It sounds better than monkeypox.
Yeah.
Mpox is kind of terrifying.
It is, and I don't want to get it.
Clinical.
I don't want to get it, so I'm going to get this. So this, all this stuff that I explored over the last year does leave me with some optimism because when COVID happened, the book 1984, in 2021, it was the 17th best-selling book in the world. So somebody had their head screwed on.
Yeah.
And so that gives me a little bit of hope. And this book, which can I be a whore and hold it up
please.
again? Okay.
Forbidden Facts.
That's the book.
Where can one get that? Can they get it
Amazon.
on Amazon?
Sure.
Did you do an audio version of it?
There's an audio version. Did
you read it?
I did.
Yes.
And I love when the authors read it.
Yes, me too.
And there's also a whatever you call it, an ebook version, which is only $5. I don't make any money from the book. The publisher doesn't make any money from the book. The purpose of the book is to help some people persuade some other people to be more pessimistic because, that was an interesting slip. To be more, to have more skepticism. Don't be more pessimistic.
Be more skeptical.
Yeah, it might have the result of making some people more pessimistic, but to be more realistic about this stuff so that we can maybe have enough people who say, you know what? I mean, interestingly, by the way, right now, COVID shots were supposed to be given down to 6 months old. Not at this moment. It was stopped by RFK Jr. and the new administration, but it was supposed to be given down to 6 months old, and almost no parents did it. So that's something to be optimistic about.
Yes.
Right? They just, whatever their sense is, this thing didn't really help the vaccine industry as much as they probably hoped.
I think it did the exact opposite.
I hope.
I think it opened up a lot of people's eyes to alternative ways of doing things. But the problem is with some school systems, your children must be fully vaccinated in order to attend, unless you have some sort of religious exemption. Or
even religious exemption is taken away in California.
In California, because California's fucking nuts.
Trying to take it away in. You want to move back?
Okay.
Oh, by the way, another benefit I got, you're part of, which is that I came here to see you a few years ago, and then I drove to San Antonio. And I looked at some properties that were like old hotels because they were all empty during COVID time. They'd had problems. And we moved our company headquarters to San Antonio, Texas, out of California. And that's been awesome, where you go and you meet with a building inspector and he says, hey, that looks good. Yeah, okay. As opposed to waiting 8 months to get a no. I mean, the whole Texas thing is a gift from you that I'm so grateful for. And our company now is based in San Antonio as its headquarters, and we don't require vaccination, needless to say. And we had one 31-year-old applicant fall down dead during the run. We have a run for physical requirements, physical fitness requirements, vaccinated, and we did the testing for troponin and for D-dimer, which is the cardiac indicators of cardiac problems. We did it for every applicant, and in the first 54 people, these are all young men who don't smoke. These are all fit people. In the first 54, 17 had to go to cardiologists. That's a true stat.
And they had no idea there was anything wrong with them before.
No, and some of them there wasn't anything wrong with them.
So the D-dimer test detects blood clots, is that correct?
It's for microclotting. And troponin and D-dimer are both cardiac indicators. Now, I'll tell you why I did it. I was having lunch with a very well-known doctor from Yale, who now has left Yale, one of the people who opposed the vaccine program and opposed the mandatory vaccines for college students, but not, they were giving it to students, but not faculty. Jesus. Anyway, he said to me, I said, we're not taking anybody and putting them through the physical fitness regimen to apply to our company if they were vaccinated in the last 2 weeks. And he said, well, where'd you get 2 weeks? So I said, I read it in an article. I really don't know. He said, no. 2 weeks isn't going to make any difference. You have to test them for D-dimer and troponin levels. So we started doing that, and then we did the entire company. Anybody who was vaccinated, many people chose to be. They were coming out of the military. But
can I stop you? Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. Troponin levels are something that they measure for myocarditis, correctly?
Yeah, for cardiac, it's one of the cardiac markers in general in blood.
And it isn't one of the reasons why they were saying that more young people who just infected by the virus had higher rates of myocarditis than even people that were vaccinated. Remember they were trying to say that in the beginning?
They did say it, and it is bullshit.
It is bullshit, but it was because of troponin levels, right? So that measured during infection.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, but it's possible. It's certainly I know the answer that it is one of the things measured during infection.
But they were calling it myocarditis when there wasn't actually
that makes sense.
There wasn't a scan on the heart to see enlargement of the heart.
Right, there wasn't. You can.
They were just measuring troponin levels. And they're saying, look, there's more myocarditis in people that are infected with the vaccine or the virus rather than the vaccine.
Well, that is. I don't know all the details, but that is now dropped in any case. They've dropped that defense because the reality is there was a test done at the Cleveland Clinic of all the healthcare professionals before they were vaccinated and then all of them after. And they had COVID. And so they had a baseline of how many had elevated D-dimer, for example. And then afterwards, I'm not going to quote the stat because I just don't remember it, many, many people had the elevated D-dimer afterwards who didn't have it before. So the vaccine, the idea that the vaccine, it's a good idea. It's what they always try, right? Which is to say, the disease is worse than the thing you're being vaccinated against.
Right.
By the way, the expert who told me to get everybody tested in my company, because they're young, fit men, and they're stressed physically, they're very often heavy exertion, both through our academy and of course, in the work, is Dr. Harvey Risch. Just FYI, I just wanted to acknowledge that that's the guy. He was couldn't have been more prominent and decorated and important up until he started taking positions against COVID, and then he, then he eventually left Yale. He's still, I think, emeritus professor there. But all those guys who were brave are really heroic because and some of them now are in NIH and FDA.
Which is very interesting, right?
Very interesting development.
It's going to be interesting to see what they're able to accomplish over these 4 years.
Well, I'll tell you a piece of it that is good for your listeners to hear, and that is that a lot of things are being accomplished that the corporate media just doesn't report. Right. So for example, when the ACIP committee decided to take mercury out of all vaccines, and Bobby did an impassioned presentation, a video asking all countries in the world to follow, many had already done it before, nobody reported that. Right? No corporate media reported that. So there's a lot of things going on that people just aren't aware of, and that are very valuable. Stopping a bunch of mRNA research projects that didn't look like they were promising, and stopping fluoride in water, recommending against it, all the things that are going on with foods. There's a lot going on there, but nobody will report it because if you didn't know this already, the corporate media hates Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a lot.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it has anything to do with being funded by pharma. Who knows?
It might have something to do with it. I saw a statistic that showed the percentage of mainstream news articles that were negative about him, and it's bananas. It's in the 90s.
Yeah. And we also, even when I was here last time, we put up that something over 90% of cable news channels are sponsored by pharma. In fact, something like 80-something% is just Pfizer all by itself. By the way, optimistic. So we moved my company to San Antonio. I'm so happy about it. My employees are so much happier about it. We operate all over the country, but our training now is here, and we're always hiring. And we're now hiring in a state. We're hiring from anywhere in the country, but we're hiring in a state where people like something in common, freedom.
Yeah.
Right. And in California, God bless California. I lived there I was born there and most of my life. But holy shit, you've been to San Francisco? Holy shit.
Yeah, I don't even go anymore. It's too fucked up. I have friends that just went and they did shows there. They said it's hard to get people to go out because if you park your car anywhere, it's going to get broken into. Yeah. And he was talking to the people that are there, and it's like it's just a ghost town. Restaurants are closing. Everything's fucked up. Just people, just refuse everywhere you look in the street. Just human waste and shit and piss and.
You're making it sound bad.
It's just crazy how bad it got in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. San Francisco too. Stores boarded up, and we're definitely in a time of social decay, and that is a reality that we all have to accept. And that is, by the way, also part of human nature. That's what empires do. Empires decay.
Right. I mean, it doesn't seem necessary if it's not everywhere.
I think it's necessary. Oh, you mean necessary to have LA be that bad or San Francisco be that? Oh, no, of course not.
It can be corrected. It's just like, how are you not correcting? And everybody keeps voting the same way. It's just like, do you not see where this trend is headed? Like, you've got to do something radical to clean this up.
Well, maybe Rick Caruso will run for mayor. He ran the last time.
Maybe he'll run for governor.
Yes, that's possible too. And he's I know him, and a very interesting guy, and I would vote for him and support him in every way I can. But it's possible because when these fires happened, probably the most common thing you heard in L.A. was, oh, shit, I wish I'd voted for Rick Caruso. Yeah. I mean, they'd voted for somebody that didn't have much history and just didn't do a great job around the fires. And it's sad to see that decay the way that it is, but I want to work on the optimistic part that I'm not there anymore. I stay in a hotel when I go there. It's so much fun because it reminds me every time I push the elevator button, I don't live here anymore.
All right. Well, Gavin, thank you very much. Hold up your book one more time so people can go buy it.
Please.
Forbidden Facts. Appreciate you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. You too, Jeff. Thanks
Bye,
so much.
everybody.